Mike Murray.
This is SNL.
SNL.
By the numbers.
Numbers.
We have arrived to the end of season 49, SNL by the numbers. Who else would I have with me but Bill Kenney, John Schneider, back for the marathon show. We go through every cast member in order, give you every stat. So thanks for being with us all season. We are a presentation of latenighter.com. John Schneider, it's been a hell of a ride. How are you?
I'm great, Mike. Put the coffee on. We're going to be here a while. We are going to go through every single cast member, no holds bar, talk about their seasons. I can't wait. I know this is one of the most anticipated podcasts of the year, and I'm excited to wrap it all up with you. What a year for you, Mike.
It's been a crazy ride. I mean, this is preparation for 50, and the podcast has grown so much thanks to Bill Kenney, who I believe just made his 75th SNL appearance recently. So congrats to Bill on that milestone. Bill, great to have you. Who else but Bill Kenney? Welcome back.
Thank you, Mike. I knew I was approaching that number. Is there a 75 timer jacket? I do, because I have a playlist of all the episodes I've been on because I'm narcissistic. So, but
he has
thank
a best
you.
of DVD.
Yes, exactly. No, I'm more like Will Ferrell. I'll have the 3 DVDs. So, yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. You know, the week to week is always a lot of fun, but as we all are sports fans, like when you get to the end of that season, seeing where everything really fits into the grand scheme of things is so much fun. And I was here with you last year, and I'm excited to be here again this year.
Yeah, this is what goes on the back of the baseball card. You know, the season has wrapped, and now it's just the stats speak for themselves, and we're going to give our commentary as well. John, you look like you have a thought.
I was going to say, I'm so curious about this. Is Bill the second most appeared person on this podcast besides me? Do you know that, Mike?
For sure.
Do you do the podcast? Okay, interesting. All right. Bill, look at you.
I did not know that. So
Yeah. Real Phil Hartman.
The Phil of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, very excited to be here with you, Mike. So take the show away.
All right. So you may have noticed I did not open with an opening haiku tonight. I was thinking back to last season. We had our first weekly by the numbers season. And on the finale was when I debuted the opening haiku. As I was with Bill and John. So this morning, reflecting, I was thinking, like, I don't know if a haiku would do the season justice. So I wrote myself a ballad. So what do you think, John? Is this season worthy of it?
The Ballad of Mike Murray. I love it. I can't wait to hear it.
All right. So this was a fun little project this morning, but here it goes. The writer's strike has ended, read that early fall headline. It seemed that SNL was back for season 49. Our old friend Pete would soon come home to play the role of host. The cast would all return to work, along with Chloe Troast. The fans would flock to 30 Rock and join the standby line. On NBC and on Peacock, it started right on time. I'm Just Pete, he sang, and Heidi fell right through the desk. Mini PDD and Dismukes buried to his neck. Bad Bunny thought it funny if he'd play the role of Shrek. Mick Jagger had some fun with nuns. Bargatze was up next. Mikey Day debuted as Biden. Stab at Love with Chloe Fineman. Washington addressed the troops and told them what's at stake. Foo Fighters introduced again a beach beside the lake. Tiny Horse was all grown up when Chalamet came back. Kenan had that baby face since old days of all that. Little Orphan Cassidy crooned tunes to Mr. Moon. Momoa takes off Sarah's head, a burly tennis goon. Remember Lizard's Castaway and Devon's Draymond Green. Marcello's bouncer tells us something without being mean. Bowen bids farewell to Santos' Scandal in the Wind. Emma wins Longfellow's Tortoise, asks what's in the kiln. Beep beep, because drivers coming through with tiny bags to pedal. Christmas chocolate TikTok pranks, a baby who won't settle. Kate is home for Christmas with her old familiar charm. Yankee swap and North Pole news, a trip to Tampon Farm. ABBA hits, joke swap back, the perfect pet named Pongo. Rich auntie with no kids, veranda brought to us by Ego. A Lordy kicked off 24, short kings and bowling pins. McAdams takes an acting class, hello Garrett from Hinge. Timberlake, chicken fongers, give talk show reintroduced. Dakota Johnson, John and Martin make a Nepo truce. Io pops in with the Dune popcorn bucket, brings Ego to court for a brain-bearing mullet, while Shane Gillis Thrillist fired 45 feature for Gliana and Gump and Trump's golden sneakers. Sydney Sweeney's in line to keep us up late to finally reveal that Bowen is straight. Airbnb and Hooter be Owl. She flirts with Air Bud and picks up Glenn Powell. Brolin rolls in with some ScarJo star power, Ariana Sandwich King, and a sky-high glass trim tower. Rami's Twisted Rock and Ball with Travis Scott got them too high. Ozempic for Ramadan is here to help you two get by. Kristen finally gets a jacket, and so do all her friends. Doesn't want to get Jumanji'd. Forte comprehends. Gosling does his very best to keep his breaks in line. Beavis and Butthead Papyrus 2 is cut for time. Sarah Sherman steals the heart of Double Duty. Dua Lipa, Keenan's OBGYN, prescribes some smoked paprika. Maya Rudolph's at 8H in time for Mother's Day. Back at Hot Ones as Beyonce teacher PSA. Jake Gyllenhaal wraps up the season riding up the hill. We get a second joke swap with some help from Rabbi Jill. JAJ bursts in as Snake Eyes giving looks that kill. What's in store for season 50? We will wait until. Molly, Punkie, Devon Walker, Che, and Colin Jost. Kenan, Mikey, Chloe Fineman, also Chloe Troast. Bowen, Ego, Heidi, and Dismukes and Marcello. James Austin Johnson, Sarah Sherman, Michael Longfellow. 50 years of SNL to celebrate next year. When Michael set the date and time, I promise we'll be here.
Wow. Seriously. Unbelievable. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
No topping that. Great job, Mike. Wow.
As someone who's only able to do There Was a Man from Nantucket, I'm so impressed. Wow, that's incredible.
So when you become a father, you have a lot of time, do you?
Not a lot of time. Not a lot of time, but
that was incredible.
That was great.
You do get the the iambic pentameter, when you start reading some children's stories. So maybe it was just bouncing around in there, and some SNL Shakespeare for you.
Well, I loved every minute of it, and I'm sure everyone who's listening to this did as well. So thank you for blessing us with your talent, Mike Murray.
Oh, no problem. That was a fun time.
Amazing. Now the pressure's on. You got to do this again year after year.
Oh, geez. All right. Well, I got to write like an epic, like the Iliad next year. I don't know. I don't know. I can go longer.
We'll make it happen. But great job, Mike. Seriously, yeah, so impressed.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm officially out of breath, so let's do the longest podcast of the year.
Let's do it. That was the warm up, people, because we're gonna get into it. So, Mike, do you want to tell the listeners how this podcast is gonna work?
I would be so honored. So we're gonna do, like I mentioned, back of the baseball card stats. We're gonna go in order. We did the final by the numbers power rankings reveal last week, so we're gonna go in that order from 17 to 1. And just highlight everything you need to know. So that's screen time, appearances, what their final score was. You'll see the highs and lows of their season, how they improved from last year, and a lot of fun stuff like update appearances live from New York if they were in promos. So shout out to Ellis and Matt for their incredible work preparing these slides, because you're going to get a ton of information. It looks sexy as hell, and it'll be on social media this week.
Absolutely. Yeah. Huge shout out to them. They work so hard on these. All right, Mike. So who's coming up first?
So we're going to get a really interesting season. So a memorable one stat-wise, maybe not for the performer themselves, but it'll be Molly Kearney at 17 for the first slide. So
yeah.
where do we begin, Bill? I mean, this was a season. Ellis texted me earlier just of how incredible this season was for Molly, not in a great way, but it's insane to see a cast member without like a single showcase. I was looking through the role categorizations I did. I think the only time Molly had an A was when they played the lead nun in the Bad Bunny sketch. So, Bill, what can we say about number 17, Molly Kearney?
Very concerned. The first thing I wrote down when I was taking notes going through was no moment to point to for Molly. When your biggest highlight is a cut for Time Weekend Update sketch from Christmas, which was fantastic, by the way. If you haven't seen that, go to YouTube and watch that, where she talks about her family. And yeah, it's really sad that they didn't find a niche at all for Molly. So I don't really know. Do we expect her to come back? Them to come back? Excuse me. I don't know. Like, the numbers don't look really great going into a third season.
All right, so I will give you Molly's stats. So they appeared 40 times. That's 13th in the cast. Screen time was 23 minutes, 52 seconds. Their ultimate, average over the season power ranking was a 23.1, which again is super low. Most appeared with Heidi. 29 of their segments were with Heidi. 3 live from New York, so we saw them a few times in cold opens. Remember that controversial one with Chloe Troast and some of the sports themed ones that Molly would pop in with their impressions of Terry Bradshaw and, et al. 0 weekend update appearances, as Bill alluded to. So I figured if there was a time to get Molly somewhere to do their own thing, it would have been updates. So I wish we did see that. No appearances in the promos, and best screen time of the year was 2 minutes 55. So that's total for one episode. So there's the rundown on Molly. John, go to you.
I'm going to be honest with the listeners. I have been partially not being able to fall asleep over the last few days, just thinking about how I'm going to talk about Molly on this podcast. And I kid you not, I've been back and forth about what I want to say, what I should say, because I've met Molly, and Molly is a really nice person, genuinely nice person. And they are a great stand-up comic. I think that, again, I think I said this on another podcast that, it was very enlightening to talk to Aristotle Atari last year, because it goes to show you that, there are two sides to these stories where, you could look at a performer on the show and feel that they're not meant for Saturday Night Live, or you can also see it from the other angle, which is that the system itself doesn't fit them. So I don't know which one it is here. I don't know if it's a systemic problem at Saturday Night Live, or it's just Molly isn't the right person for SNL. However, I think there's an argument to be made that Molly had one of the worst seasons ever at Saturday Night Live. And I think there's an argument to be made that Molly had one of the worst second seasons ever, if not the worst second season ever at Saturday Night Live, with no discernible moments that we can look back on and be like, okay, they had a really impactful moment here or there. I know that there's things that got addressed that were Molly based, but really nothing that had Molly's name on a writing credit, nothing that had an A roll there. So truly, as featured of a featured player, that they can be. And I think the thing that I want to be careful and say with, from a good place, is just that I wonder if writers, if Molly, there's two things, right? Does Molly have a writer that knows how to write for them? And then the second thing is, do writers feel comfortable putting Molly in their sketches while not knowing how to identify them in traditional male or female roles? Because that is, what sketch comedy was based off of a long time. It's okay. Even if a man was playing a woman or a woman was playing a man, there was clearly gendered roles written for sketches. And we have the only case in the history of the show here of someone who identifies as non-binary, and they're not having success on the show. So I think it's fair to wonder if people know how to write for someone who is non-binary, and, if there's enough androgynous style roles in sketches that are available to be played, or is Molly only going to be in sketches when they're discernibly playing a traditional female role, or even the other way, a traditional, more masculine role? I don't know. So I want to be touchy, and I hope the listeners give me the grace to be able to say what I'm trying to say. But I just have to ask the question here, because Molly's in a little bit of a unique situation, and it's not the traditional white man not doing well on the show. This is someone who is different than what we have seen before on the show, and through 2 seasons, especially the second one, they have not found success. So though we are looking at the numbers here, and we're going to be diving into deep analytics, there are not a lot of deep analytics, I think, to get into when it comes to Molly. So that's why I'm taking this from a little bit more of a broad perspective. So did I say that okay, Mike? Does that make sense?
No, that was beautifully said. And it is tough to talk about when we're trying to be look at the show comedically and look at the show stat wise. But there's things that are at play in the real world with how we talk about non-binary people. And I think Molly is seemingly they've had no problem playing roles, female or male, using gendered pronouns, and had that awesome opportunity at the end of last year to talk about the they them pronouns, and in that new cast pre-tape early where they were hilarious, I thought, and the 10-1 pre-tape PDD from the Chappelle episode when they were the candidate that was the write-in winner. So there were moments, and it seems also like behind the scenes everyone really likes Molly because I see them on social media hanging out with everybody. So this doesn't seem like the Aristotle case where someone's kind of being left out. It seems like Molly is very much in the mix. But just to compare, John, you're saying about how could be one of the worst stat seasons. I've said many times on this program that, Aristotle had 15 minutes of fame because his total stat line for a full season was 15 minutes, 38 seconds, where Molly's rookie year, they had 48 minutes, 11 seconds. Pretty strong rookie year for someone that didn't do a lot of lead pieces. And their screen time this year was 23 minutes, 52 seconds. So that's down 55%. That's a huge sophomore drop off. So, of course, you can look at it optimistically and say there's nowhere to go but up. And it's great that we even have a non-binary cast member that we can talk about so casually, as Demi mentioned in the chat. So it's great that we can have these talks and not just be afraid of it. But as far as stat goes, as far as SNL goes, it is just unfortunate to have this low of a season across the board. It would have been nice to see one stand out and then maybe they go back, but that's about it for me.
Yeah. And I think, again, like, the great thing about By the Numbers on this podcast versus some of the other ones that we do on the network is like we really do just look at the data here beyond just your eye test. And like the data is rough. If you go look at the card we have on screen with the screen time by episode, I mean, so many episodes here with under a minute of screen time, power ranking by episode near the lowest of the list most of the time. So, like I said, it just feels like there was no, strong effort to push Molly in any way on the show this year. And, just, now being an analyst of SNL as a whole and not talking about any, like for Molly, it's almost like if you're not going to push them on the show, why have them there and take away 40 appearances that can go to other people? We would want to see Molly more to at least get the opportunity to properly evaluate what they can do on Saturday Night Live. But Bill, I don't know about you, but I feel through, 38 episodes from Molly's career, I still don't know what Molly can do on SNL. Like, genuinely no idea.
Yes, and you made some really great points. I think this is a systemic problem with SNL going back to the original era, with Garrett Morris, with Lorraine Newman. African Americans, especially in the early days, had a hard time, other than Eddie, getting time on having someone figure out how to write for them. And, even leading to Terry Sweeney and having the first openly gay cast member in 1985. So yeah, and that's the same thing. You could go back and look at a lot of those folks and say, who were they on the show? Terry Sweeney, they would put in a dress. Like, it was so ridiculous and so demeaning. That was the only thing they knew to do with Terry. Garrett Morris would just play the angry black guy a lot of times. And so, but look at some of those gender and roles now, and you see people like Maya Rudolph, and you see Ego, who dominates the show. And so there's hope for the future. Does that mean that Molly is going to get their chance? I don't know. And that's really sad. As you said, they seem like such a great person. But I think that's probably the main point, that nobody knows how to write for them. And if they're not writing for themselves enough or not getting pieces on that they're trying to get on, then here we are.
And John, I'll wrap up Molly slide 1. I think you're on record saying that you think all 17 cast members will be back, correct?
I think
If
no, that's
they
not what I
want
said.
to. If they
I
want
think
to.
if all 17 want to come back, they will come back. I'm
They'll
not
be invited
100%
back,
sure
yeah.
that the show won't make changes. And I do think that if the show was going to make a change, there's a high possibility this is one of them.
Because it would be interesting to see someone go 2 featured seasons and then not get the upgrade. So if they are back, then Molly will be rep cast, I would imagine. So I just wanted to ask you, John, just so I don't have to ask every slide predicting the future. But is there any room, as maybe there could be a little guilt on SNL's part to acknowledge that Molly, being the first non-binary cast member, is not getting the screen time? They're at the lowest of every stat. Is there room for like a Kyle Mooney like thing with them where it's acknowledged that like, hey, this is my screen time tonight, at least to make Molly more of an underdog instead of having people feel bad for them? Because I don't know, at least it's a little trajectory to kind of pick up maybe some 10-1 role or something like that. I don't know. Instead of just having everything be cut. Does that make sense, John?
I mean, I just haven't seen it, right? Like, I haven't seen any evidence that the show would look at something like this and be like, all right, well, we have to give Molly something this week, because they haven't done it. Like, at least in, like, I'll say, like, I was there after the I was there backstage and at the after party of the Anna de Armas episode where Molly Kearney got on Weekend Update. And I could tell you the pure joy in the, like, everyone walking around backstage being like, you got to see what Molly's doing tonight. It's finally Molly's night. And people were so excited for Molly. But that was 12 months ago or 13 months ago. And there's been nothing since then. So when you go an entire, like, it's a whole new season, we're going to be heading into 50. So it'll be like literally if Molly comes back, season 50, episode 1 will be a year and a half since Molly's done anything of note on Saturday Night Live. It's a long time. Like, so again, I will root for Molly. And if Molly doesn't come back, I hope that Molly will at least tell their story so we understand it from their perspective. But if I'm just going to be objective here, I have not seen any evidence that indicates that Molly Kearney will be moving forward at SNL.
Right. I mean, when we start at the beginning of the show, it's always, it takes a while to talk about these cast members that are so low because there's a lot of things to demystify, and numbers often do it. But in this case, it seems like when there's a hockey player in the playoffs or something that hasn't scored a goal and you're like, oh, they're just snake bitten, like they'll get there. So I kept thinking that way for Molly, for Longfellow. And so when it never happened and the season ends after 20 episodes, it just a little frustrating, but I guess we'd have to know, and maybe we could look up, do the research on the pieces that they had that were cut. So meaning that it made it through table, it made it to, set design, costumes, and makeup, even went to dress, to maybe get a little bit more insight. But
I mean, while we're here,
yeah,
I
go
can
for
just
it.
tell you that Molly had a piece that was cut from Weekend Update from last episode. So that was the Gyllenhaal one. Also had a St. Patrick's Day Weekend Update piece. And a Kate from the Kate McKinnon episode had a piece where they were talking about holiday traditions. So that's 3 episodes in, the last 12 episodes of the season where they were cut from Weekend Update. Molly gets 1, 2, or 3 of those on. We have something to talk about here, but we didn't happen.
Right. And Ellis says 3 Weekend Update pieces plus a cut sketch in Rami's episode, which was the episode that broke the shutout streak. So we did not see Molly in that show, and it had been all the way since the Travis Kelce episode that we had every single cast member in every episode. So that was the one that's all zeros on the screen here.
Right.
Move on to number 16.
Let's do it. Who's coming up for number 16, Mike?
So we have our rookie, the only rookie of season 49. It was Chloe Troast. She finished with a 32.3 in the power ranking, 47 appearances. So if you look at these cards, so I really encourage you to look at them on YouTube watching with us or on the SNN socials so you can see everything there. But, we did have Molly's average appearance per episode, which was 2, same as last year. So Chloe Troast averaged 2.35 appearances. Her total screen time, 44 minutes, 25 seconds. So that's in line with the last year rookies. So I mentioned Molly's rookie screen time. So Chloe Troast is right there, 44 minutes, 25 seconds. That's 14th in the cast. So we saw her most with the other Chloe Fineman, 28 times. She had a couple live from New York's. One was that Adam Driver cold open I mentioned that maybe set her back a little bit. You've been saying, John, and I agree. And then we saw her in the, of course, everybody said it in the Maya Rudolph, or almost everybody, for the Mother's Day. Disappointed we not see Troast on Update. Again, we saw all those rookies, Longfellow, Marcello, Devon, and Molly last year. We did not see Chloe Troast reach the desk this year. 6 minutes, 3 seconds was her highest screen time of the season. And, a little bit up and down, but there were some moments. So, Bill, can you tell me some moments from Chloe Troast that encourage you for season 50 for a second year feature?
I'm very encouraged for Chloe Troast. I feel like we saw so many great moments with her this year. I'd say other than JAJ, she was the most wow to me coming out. I mean, it was a couple episodes in with Chalamet with Little Orphan Cassidy. But as soon as she started singing, it was like, oh, okay, now this is what we're going to get from Chloe. And one of my favorite sketches of the whole season was the Mama Cass, Make Your Own Kind of Music with Emma Stone. A lot of great, I mean, she found her lane very quickly with the singing, filled that kind of gap that we had since Cecily left, for better or for worse. I think for better. I think there was a lot of great songs, and getting to see her, play with some of these people like Kate McKinnon and Maya Rudolph. So I'm very hopeful for her future. And, you mentioned the cold open where she had to play Elise Stefanik, and, the rumors that were going on that it was supposed to be Cecily. And I think she handled that with aplomb. She really dealt with all the online hate. And she's one of my new favorites for sure.
I agree. I'm very encouraged by her first season, 15 appearances out of 20 episodes where she had over a minute appearance. So she had over 5 minutes in that Mama Cass sketch and almost 5 minutes in the Little Orphan Cassidy sketch. So almost once a night, once a week, I should say, that Chloe Troast was on screen for a minute. And they, like Bill said, they did put faith in her by having her work with those vets. Even if it wasn't a great sketch, like thinking of that Judy Garland Cinema Classics with Kate, like I didn't love the sketch, but Chloe Troast, I thought, put in the best effort possible and get that boy back. I mean, me and John did a whole patron podcast on that sketch and how I loved it. It was like one of my favorites of the year. And I think I mentioned, I told Troast herself that Little Orphan Cassidy might be my number one, if not top 3 sketch of the year. That was after the Rami show, but it's still true now after 20 episodes. So, John, we got to meet Chloe before she was a cast member and while she's a cast member, and can't wait to see her in 50. What can you say about our girl Troast?
I was really impressed. I mean, to me, I love getting to meet new personalities on the show because it's like watching a prospect be called up to the majors in any sport. You're like, oh, wow, like to see this person, like what their skills are, what they can do. So the singing was apparent from the beginning. It was like, okay, that's cool. That's an element we've seen before on the show. What can they do? And then we got the Little Orphan Cassidy sketch and the Make Your Own Kind of Music. And then right away, the talk was every single week, okay, but we like Chloe, but is she going to do? Is it just going to be singing? Which wasn't really the case. I do think that you can't not talk about the Adam Driver cold open as a part of the first chapter of her career on Saturday Night Live. It was a big moment, both on screen and off screen. And I do think that led to a lack of prominent roles in screen time as Chloe needed to readjust. I mean, it was like a jarring moment where all of a sudden, like, you're a rookie on the show. You've been performing, but you've never been in the spotlight like this where millions of people are watching you. And all of a sudden you're getting all this hate online and you don't know how to turn it off and you don't really understand it to a full degree. So it must have been very jarring. And you go on this long extended holiday break. And I think it took a while for Chloe Troast to find her footing again, but starting really with Sydney Sweeney's episode where she did the Airbnb sketch. And then moving forward after that, I'd say with the Dua Lipa episode as an exception, where she was shut out, she had some pretty good, steps forward to find her footing again. And I think that, we could look at her season as bookends as far as I'm concerned. It's really Little Orphan Cassidy and the Mama Cass sketch at the beginning of the season. And it's the Airbnb and Get That Boy Back at the end of the season that showcased that, okay, she had at the beginning, had this midseason slump, and then picked it back up at the end. And overall, I would say, I think she had a good first season on the show. And from a skill perspective, I think she has the skills to be a great cast member. I would expect a step forward in year 2.
Definitely expect a step forward. I mentioned that, her screen time actually lower than all the rookies last year, but I think made a bigger impact. We could talk about how Marcello jumped so forward this year, but last year, I don't think we talked about Marcello in that way. We were probably talking about Longfellow and Update more than anybody else. But one thing I want to mention is the sketches that aren't that notable, but are interesting to me, because in eras past of SNL, it wouldn't matter if it was just a straight role that was kind of unremarkable. They would probably give it to a Cecily Strong or a Kate McKinnon. Even when Kate wasn't being Kate and 80 wasn't being 80, they would have them play the girlfriend role or the mom role, and if it fit. But I'm looking at Troast sketches this year and seeing like Protective Mom 2 with Bad Bunny, where she played the girlfriend this time and not Chloe Fineman. And then the Cookie sketch with Gyllenhaal also playing the girlfriend. So I know she's a young woman in the cast. That makes sense. But don't you feel like in eras past, they would be like, oh, just put Heidi, Ego, or Chloe Fineman there because they've earned it, where Troast is still making her way. And there's also like the, little moments like the airplane sketch from Bargatze or HR meeting where she was playing off Shane Gillis a lot. So there's also some things where she wasn't the lead role or the A role, but was playing utility roles that I feel like in eras past would go to a vet just like standard practice.
Well, besides the Gillis sketch you mentioned, again, these are all book-ending season sketches where you're talking about her playing the girlfriend in Protective Mom, the second episode of the season. She does it again in the finale. So to me,
Garrett from Hinge, Wedding. I mean, that's a Lordy. It was mid-season,
Sure. Yeah. Look, I'm just saying what I saw with my own eyes, which is just that, like, I did feel like there was a bounce back towards the end of the season, and it was more similar to what I saw at the beginning.
For sure. I'll give you Troast's best stat episodes in order of best to lowest. And I'll just read the top. Emma Stone was her best, Adam Driver second, Chalamet, and then a Lordy. So that's all in the first 9 episodes. Following with that was Gosling, which is at the end of the year, as John mentioned, Bad Bunny, second episode of the year, and Kate, which is in the first half. So for sure. And then after that, it was Maya and Jake. So yeah, her low episodes were definitely like more in the low 10s, like Dakota Johnson, Rami, Brolin, Bargatze, Momoa, and of course, Shutout from the Dua Lipa show.
Can I also say no Weekend Update appearances from Chloe Troast this season? So
yeah,
that's
what I opened up with, was just saying that I was surprised to see that. I figured that there was going to be a time where we get a full intro to Chloe Troast and not just singing Troast.
Yeah, Bill, I'd be curious. I don't know if you can think off the top of your head. Otherwise, we'll ask chat just because we're live if we can't look it up right now. But when the last time we had a rookie that didn't appear on Update in the rookie season? It's been a long time, I think.
I think it took Ego a very long time, and I think it took Beck a long time, just off top of my head.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, you both bring up great points, and I think it's interesting. It hasn't happened very much in the history of the show, but for one person to come in as a rookie, and this is probably one of the best seasons for someone in that position. They don't have anybody else to deflect to. Obviously, the 4 that came in last year are still relatively new, but it doesn't happen very much in the history of the show where only one person comes in as a featured player. And I know what we've heard from some of those people, that it's really difficult because the cast has already died, and how do you fit in? And I think she did really well considering that as another obstacle for becoming big on SNL.
I'll ask one more prediction because it's relevant to what Bill said, John, is if everyone's back, that would mean that our season 48 rookies are promoted traditionally after 2 years. So Troast would be the only featuring. It would be like featuring Chloe Troast, a film from Please Don't Destroy. So I expect them to add every year, but I mean, it's a possibility. John, what do you think? Could there just be Troast and somebody else or a couple people? Let's get it live on air here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. If I'm gonna put pens and paper on it, I think that if I had to guess, there's a chance that Molly's not asked back, and that Longfellow, Marcello, and Devon are all promoted. In which case, maybe there's another budget for another featured player, and we may get an additional featured player. So there'll be 2 in season 50. That would be what I would guess.
All right, fair enough. I just feel like it would be, you kind of want that new rookie energy, you know? You like to have someone to root for or see pop up and say, who's that? I mean, JAJ being the biggest example, coming in so hot and seeing Sarah emerge. Like those storylines, at least for us, are fun. So I love that.
Yeah, and I can also say, like, something we don't talk about too much here is that, people don't just leave the show because of like projects or getting like really big off of the show. Like sometimes they leave because like their family like wants to move to LA or something like that. Like I think Beck talked about that a lot, where he was just like, look, like my wife like wanted me to like move. So that was it for me. And like it is possible that despite all of our thoughts about season 50 coming up and like why would anybody want to leave because this big anniversary show is around the corner, that someone's just ready to go. So you never know, we might get a surprise this summer.
Did you ever hear about anything about Alex Moffat? Because I was just thinking about him, and he left. He came in with the same class as Melissa. They both left at the end of the year, but then he did become a father near the end of the season and started doing theater. So I'm just thinking, as a new dad myself, maybe having regular working hours could be a factor too. I'm not leaving. You're gonna need a wrecking ball to get me out of here, John. Just thinking like that. I was thinking of other examples of, it might not be on-screen things or off-screen things. It could just be personal life things. So
yeah,
that's a factor as well.
Everyone has a different situation going on. So I think SNL has given us many surprises over the summer before. We just have to be on high alert to see if anything's going to happen.
All right, on to number 15. So this is a cast member that I think in By the Numbers recaps past got the most screen time talked about, because we were trying to demystify why isn't Punkie Johnson used more. And Punkie did have some comeback moments when she was, upgraded, and we were like, okay, it's Punkie season, let her cook, all those things. But then again, was just above Troast. So Troast's final number, power ranking 32.3. Punkie's in 15th place with a 33.8. So 51 appearances, 37 minutes, 34 seconds of screen time. That puts her only ahead of Molly. So now we can safely call Punkie Johnson a vet. Definitely not getting vet numbers. So that means that, we're going to go through these slides after, but that means that Punkie Johnson's behind even Michael Longfellow, who's going to be up next, spoiler alert, and Devon Walker, and of course, Marcello. So I'll go through some Punkie numbers. We didn't see her too much, anywhere particular. We saw her live sketches because, she's so good at that. But, I saw her on Update a little bit, and some cold opens. I feel like my take would be, I love seeing Punkie show up in the monologues. We saw that with the kind of double monologue with Chalamet. She comes out and does the rap, the babyface rap, as like the Nicki Minaj type character. But another up and down season for Punkie. And this is somebody that I think I'd be like really a little upset if she didn't come back, because we're just getting to the precipice of like, all right, this is what Punkie Johnson's jam is. She's never going to be a top 5 or a top 10 stat player, but is somebody that I like to see when we do see her. So her screen time went down 20% though. So not moving in the right direction. Bill, I'll go to you again. Punkie Johnson.
Well, every team needs utility players, right? And in the 4th season, as Punkie was in, it's kind of, okay, maybe this is what we're going to get from her. As you said, probably never going to be a top 5 cast member as far as statistics go. But she seems fine. I've heard John mention it. She seems fine with where she's at on the show. She seems to have a good time every time she's in a sketch. I think of the only 2 good moments of the Lordy episode were bowling pins and when she takes her top off in the AA meeting. Like just for the pure laughs of it. Before Heidi broke in the Beavis and Butthead sketch, watching Chloe Fineman's face break as Punkie exposes herself to the nation was hilarious. And I just, she always seems like she's having a good time. That's my main perception of Punkie. And doesn't care that she's not in 6 sketches, doesn't care that she's not the screen time leader. But yeah, I mean, she had some really good moments. I think she plays a really good Gayle King that we saw when against Kenan's Charles Barkley. And then, of course, Latina Jefferson in way back at the beginning of the season, which we thought may become a recurring character. But she's good as a friend. She's good as somebody to just go to and bounce ideas off of. And I really like her, and I hope she stays. Love to see her move up a little bit, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and John, I'm just looking up this stat real quick. So 51 appearances for Punkie to kind of highlight the frequency of Punkie, but maybe not the longevity stat-wise. So 17 out of 51 appearances were a minute or more. So that means 1/3 of the time it's less than a minute. And if I look at it real quick, for the really low appearances, that's 20 of them were under 20 seconds. So we had a lot of quick hits of Punkie. I talked about that a lot with Longfellow last year about getting like one good laugh, and sometimes getting one good laugh and exiting is better than being maybe the straight utility role and, not, I forgot that Mikey was in that sketch sort of thing. So we've talked about Punkie so much, John, and, she's such a friend of the show and is just like maybe the most fun hang of the cast, in my opinion. So should we change anything? If you're Punkie's manager, I've asked this question directly before. So should we change the strategy with her, or is this somebody that's just a good SNL hype person and we should just keep it that way?
Interesting question. I mean, I think, well, first of all, most appearances of her career. So I do want to say that she's appeared, just in terms of just pure accounting numbers, she's appeared the most in this season versus others. So, we'll
up on average from last year, up 2% from season 48.
Yeah. So I'm happy to see that. I think that, so here's what I generally like. Here's my spiel about Punkie, which is that I know her and I know how people feel about her at the show, which is that she is the funniest person in the room and everybody loves to have her there, and she's not going anywhere because I would be stunned if she was going anywhere, because she makes the environment there so much fun it's so fun for everybody just to have her in the room. So I think like she's really good for like team morale, for what we're actually seeing on screen in sketches. I was really excited in Bad Bunny's episode when I saw the telenovela sketch, and I was like, okay, this is something here. We're starting to maybe see a different stage of Punkie's career. And ultimately, I do think she had a good season because it wasn't the great season that I was hoping when I saw that, but it was a good season because I think they found what works for her, which is really, she is the cast member that is great in short bursts. You can put her in a sketch for a quick laugh, and that's what you need. And if she's comfortable in that role, I think it's fantastic. To answer your question directly, Mike, if I was managing Punkie, I think that either Punkie herself or people who are helping to write for Punkie still haven't figured out how to work Punkie in with hosts. I think that Punkie, when she's on screen, it's very Punkie focused. It's her making a joke, or her at the update desk, or her character being all about that. I have not seen Punkie interacting with a host and then them working off of each other. And I do wonder if that could lead to some sketch cuts, because I know that she got cut a lot in the second half of the show because some of her the things that she's driving are not host driven enough. And I think some of the more successful cast members, as we get to the top of this list, can be more malleable when it comes to them and how they interact with different type of hosts that we see. So that would be maybe an area that I would look to improve on.
That's a great point. I feel like maybe that like therapist sketch, was that in the Gyllenhaal one previous? That was when we saw really Punkie like in the driver's seat and not being comic relief for a second or two. Because I'm looking at screen time per appearance, season 49, Punkie is second to last with 44 seconds per appearance, just to contextualize the stat I gave earlier. So she's only had 2 episodes in her SNL career. So back when SNL Stats podcast started, so did Punkie with Dismukes and Holt. And after all those episodes, getting to like, a good sample size, only 2 episodes that she's had a 5-minute episode. So I've used that stat in the past to say like, hey, whether you used on Update or a cold open or just everywhere in sketches, to hit 5 minutes is a good milestone just for the week. Those were Meg Thee Stallion early last year and Willem Dafoe the season before. So she had 6:13 with Meg Thee Stallion, 5:23 with Dafoe. So she didn't hit 5 minutes at all this year, which I think is a little concerning. I mean, I shouldn't say concerning, but disappointing. 4 minutes, 45 seconds is her third highest screen time. That was with Josh Brolin. So that's her best episode of the year this year.
One more thing on Punkie, that I think that if SNL is successfully using their cast, Punkie's stat line should be the worst cast member on the show. So like blind resume, if you just showed me, I'd be like, okay, because I think if you get to define roles in an SNL cast, I like how Ella said in the chat, the scene stealer, or Manette said that she's good for the shock factor. Like the person in the cast who steals a scene or gives you that shock should be the bottom. And that's okay, because we need somebody on the cast to fill that role. And there's obviously any season, there's going to be somebody who has the worst stats. If people are if people's stats are worse than the scene stealer, that is trouble. So like, I think Troast being an exception here, being a rookie, but that's where we start to look at the Mollys of the world and be very concerned, because Molly is below the rookie and the scene stealer.
Well said. I mean, Punkie, I think by definition is a scene stealer. So I don't predict that her stats will get that much better, but I feel like with time, 5 years in the show, I hope that she's always recognizable, because Punkie being Punkie, an expression we use a lot in this show, should continue to be a thing. Bill, any last words on Punkie?
No, you both covered it great. I love when she comes in. I think of the barbecue sketch a couple weeks ago with Kenan, and she was on the screen for 10, 15 seconds, if that. But she got some of the best laughs in that sketch because she just came in the door, even though she was breaking as soon as she walked in. She just came in, did her thing, and got out. And I think that just kind of personifies Punkie Johnson.
Hit rate very high.
Yeah.
One more stat: 19.5% of her appearance of the primetime segments she was in. So I'd like to see that stat improve. If nothing else, screen time power ranking might not get higher, but when we see her, I like to see her earlier in the night, because those scene-stealing moments should be able to grab people to keep watching the show. So let's move on to number 14, John, which is going to be
set it up.
Michael Longfellow. So this is a fascinating one, because Longfellow coming in out the gate on Update, a la Pete Davidson, on his first episode, and I think won a lot of the hearts of the young ladies watching, and also a lot of the SNL nerds, like the 3 people podcasting right now, were just kind of, rubbing their palms together, being like, what's this guy going to be at this show? Is he going to be Norm? Is he going to be Nealon? We don't think he's going to be a sketch guy like Beck, or he's not going to be the awkward Kyle or something like that, but he does have this kind of it factor. And so I really was fascinated to see his stats in year 2. And boy, was I disappointed, because Michael Longfellow, to start the year, just was putting in really bad numbers. So low with Pete, Bad Bunny, Bargatze, and Chalamet. So he never went above a 30 in the power ranking. He finally got some high numbers with Momoa and Emma Stone. And then, the line went cold until Ryan Gosling, which he had, the cold open, he anchored that. So looking at his baseball card here, 35.1 was the season average from the power ranking. Made 46 appearances, so less than Punkie. That's 12th in the cast. Screen time, 39 minutes, 46 seconds. That is down 21.2% So not the, resurgence, or I shouldn't say resurgence. I should say keeping the pace for a second year feature. He was in. He made 2 update appearances, which I think were popular. Old Fashioned Cigarette, and then the boyfriend, like willful ignorance, or whatever it was called. The being bad at things on purpose. That was a good piece. So his best episode was screen time wise 6 minutes 5. That was an Emma Stone that had that Old Fashioned Cigarette piece, and then again with Gosling with updates. So kind of lives and dies by update, which is not a bad career path on SNL if you can be an update person. And of course, we have floated the idea many times on this show that he could be behind the desk permanently, wearing a suit and tie and not a cigarette costume. So, John, I will go to you first. Our boy Michael Longfellow, I really want to see him back. I'd be crushed if he wasn't. So, tell me what you think.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd be pretty surprised if they didn't bring him back, because I do think he has a lot of skills that you would look for in an SNL cast member. I still think his dry sense of humor is something that the show desperately needs. And you saw it in that Question Quest sketch where he's the host, where he's just truly like bringing a little bit of sadisticness to those roles that I just don't know that anyone else in the cast can pull off. From an analytics perspective, if you're looking at the card here, I think the pre-tape number concerns me, because I'd be like, why? I'm starting to think to myself, like, why isn't he in pre-tapes? Is it because he, people don't know how to use him? And, I do think a lot about how he's a little bit like season 19 Norm Macdonald, which was pre-Weekend Update Norm, where most of Norm's screen time that season, though he did get a couple of sketches on air, came through asking questions to the host in the monologue. And I think that, without that, I think because he was, every time it went into the audience and he was the one asking the question, Norm, that's really what people wanted to see more of. And they brought him back because he was so funny with the one question and the weird voice and the dry sense of humor. And I just think there's a lot of stuff there that I see very similar to Longfellow, but there's no place for him on Weekend Update. There's no place for him to really be himself on the show, because we don't get the whole Michael Longfellow is going to come out as himself during a monologue. So I think he's having trouble when he's not playing like a news anchor for a sketch, unless he's playing a news anchor or he's playing a game show host. So it's tough, because I think he would be great on the show, but I'm worried that the actual show itself does not have roles available for him to be successful at this point. So does he have the patience to wait for the show to open up for him? That's my big question.
It's a tough call when you have, I'm thinking about when we had like John Milheiser, Mike O'Brien, Beck Bennett, Kyle Mooney, and Brooks Wheelan, like all these white guys come in. So he came in with this, diverse class and didn't seem like the traditional, just straight white guy, because he had that tone that John mentioned. So he has this like really smooth as butter delivery. And I don't know if that works and everything, like John's kind of just said. So, and his appearances per episode is never very good. So he appeared 5 times in the Momoa episode, 5 times in last season's finale, Ana de Armas, and 4 times with Molly Shannon, which was right before last season finale. So we're only really getting, on average, he's now appeared 100 times. So God forbid he's not back. He hit the 100 at the very end in that canceling a flight sketch. So he's at 100, which means in his episodes, he's averages 2.63 career. So he's never a guy that's going to pop up a lot, but that would make that workload a little transition to update in season 51, should he stay around. So Bill Kenney, what do you think about Michael Longfellow? I would love to see him with the rest of the season 48 crop there, go up to Repcast and kind of have a fresh start, because this was a really down slope after, I thought, a great rookie year.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the conversation we're having about Longfellow, we were having last year about Dismukes, that nobody seemed to know how to put him into a sketch. In his rookie season, all those update pieces where he was in these crazy costumes, Monette mentions it in the chat, and that's what I was thinking as well. Like, and every time something crazy popped up this year with the earthquake or with, you thought, okay, well, it's going to go to Longfellow, and then it would go to Marcello or it would go to Kenan, and you're like, okay, well, wait a minute, wasn't this kind of his, little section of the show? So that was weird after the Emma Stone episode where we saw him shine with both of those pieces that you've mentioned, with the Old Fashioned Cigarette and Question Quest. And then it was just right off the cliff. And it's just strange to see. I don't feel like there's anybody on the show like him, where you could find something for him to do. It just doesn't have to be these, back of the scene pieces. So I don't know. I'm hopeful for him. I think that he's got a lot of good stuff that he could bring to the table. I'm still shocked at the reaction that he got when he walked out to do the second Weekend Update piece that he did, and the women in the audience losing their minds. And it just reminded me of Fallon in that first or second season that he was on. Every time he came on screen, and the crowd would go wild. So I think there's a lot of hope there, and it's interesting to think about him behind the Weekend Update desk. I think he'd bring a lot to it. I hope the comparisons to Norm wouldn't be too overwhelming. You never know how somebody's going to react to something like that. But yeah, I think he'll be back, and I think we'll see those numbers go up next year.
I think the comparison, Bill, to Dismukes, the X factor was the writing. So we see Dismukes make this huge jump. People are calling him MVP of the season. I think I'd be in that camp, at least top 3, maybe top 2 for me. And Dismukes just found the secret sauce of getting his own sketches on air. So Longfellow, being from a stand-up background, as Devon and Molly were as well, coming in and having material to do an update made a lot of sense for him. So not everyone knows how to write sketch. So I'm not going to fault anybody for having an expertise in comedy, because they at least have one, so that's no shot at him. But if you're not somebody who's great at writing sketch, but you are a good joke writer, wouldn't Weekend Update make sense for you? So John, is there something that maybe you've seen from him where his sketch performance would lend itself to, okay, that's more of a Longfellow tone, let's get a sketch like that every 3 or 4 shows?
I don't know, honestly, but I do think that if Jost and Che are not leaving and Michael Longfellow is not the heir apparent for whatever reason, I wonder if this is sort of like a David Spade situation where he created his own area for himself on Weekend Update, where he was doing Hollywood Minute and then Spade in America in season 21. Because I think that like Longfellow, if he's not going to be doing the, pieces that Marcello ends up taking from him, where he's like showing up as like objects, and he can't always get stand up on, like, I wonder if there is some sort of thing he develops for him where it's like Michael Longfellow's corner on Weekend Update as a pseudo third anchor every few episodes. I think like that could be something that's huge for him, because again, like, I think that the comparison to Andrew is interesting. That's, to me, is more of a numbers thing than an actual eye test thing, because like Andrew was writing for himself always, and he always had a specific style of sketch comedy, where I just see Michael Longfellow as like pure stand-up with a very unique and quirky sense of humor that does not always get a chance to shine on the show.
Do you think that SNL post 50, which we can definitely call that will be a new era, right? I mean, we're going to go through hopefully Murderer's Row of hosts and cameos, and it's going to be a huge party all year. So 51 and beyond, SNL is going to be in definitely uncharted waters. Do you think a update kind of revamp would be in favor of him if he's not that anchor?
Mike, sorry, I lost the end of your question there. But I think you were asking what maybe Michael Longfellow can do in the future on the update. And Bill, I'd be curious if you have an answer to this at all. Any ideas?
Yeah, I think we all have our thoughts on who should take over Update. I think Sarah's been bandied about quite a bit as well. They would be an interesting pairing. I don't know that we've seen a lot of them together in sketches. So that would be fun. Would those two very quirky, unique personalities work together in a scenario like Weekend Update? I don't know. But yeah, I think there is a lot of potential for him to be at the update desk. I can't think of anybody else on the show right now, other than Sarah, that would fit in that role quite so well. So that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's just interesting, right? Because like in the last 24 years, we've always had pairings of people on Update, and you even count Seth, who bookends his time on Update with pairs. So it sort of felt like Weekend Update since the turn of the millennium has been just a different Weekend Update than what happened before it, where you just had like guy after guy after guy sort of like tell dry stand-up jokes. I don't know if you consider Dennis Miller dry, but he had his own style, and I think you go like really from Miller to Nealon to Norm to Quinn. I just think it was like if Michael Longfellow was on the show during that time, like if he was on the show in 2000, I think the show hands him Weekend Update before Tina and Jimmy.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Back there, SNL supercomputer got too hot, running too many charts at once. It literally was just, I could feel the heat from the screen right there. So sorry about that. I was going to say, John, about the new era and Find That Corner, but also point out that he's appeared on Update 7 times in his 36 episodes. So not including the shutouts, that's like every 5 episodes. It's about 20%. So, basically we're going to see Longfellow make his appearance there. So if that doesn't keep up, then that's bad. So I was about to say that if we don't see him doing the sketches and game show hosts, and it's more Kenan and JAJ as we've seen, then we need him to keep that, or the stats get really bad. So let's move on to number 13.
Lucky number 13 coming up next. So Mike, who is at number 13?
So number 13 is kind of in a league of their own, because if you look at the average power ranking for everybody, you see, 3 horses up top that were racing all year, 3 in the bottom or 4 in the bottom, including Longfellow, that were always kind of scraping the barrel for content. And then someone who's just right there, not putting up all-star numbers, but has not been shut out once in his career. And I think we would agree, had a good season because he was the person we had the least to say about last year. And that's season 2 cast member Devon Walker. Appeared 54 times. As I mentioned, has perfect attendance, not missed a show. So he appears on average 2.7 times a show, 49 minutes, 43 seconds of screen time this year. And that's right on pace from last year. He had no change. His appearances per episode went down a little bit, but I think they got more quality. So we see on his screen time by episode, he logged a 16-second episode, an 18-second episode, another 16. But other than that, it's pretty consistent. So to be Mr. Consistency when, the analysts don't have a lot to say means that you're at least putting forward some stuff or getting cast in sketches on a regular basis. So Devon Walker, 13th in the power rankings. He ranked 9th in appearances, 13th in screen time. John, we talked to Devon together at the table and were lamenting him and Longfellow not getting their Jost and Shay parody on Update. But things that we did see from him, that was cut from the Rami episode. So I hope we see that next year, because that was just such a great idea. And I love the meta, as we all do. But that seemed like meta that the lay SNL fan could appreciate, given that Jost and Shay have been there as long as they have. So Devon Walker, his style, I think, has more solidified. We saw Young Spicy come back. So there are some, and of course, Tim Scott, the political impression. So there are some breadcrumbs he's been leaving us, but that 43.6 power ranking, he's, above him is a 57.1, below him is a 35.1. So he's really the only cast member logging these types of numbers. So John, what can you see here from Devon? Because this is an interesting case more than last year.
Yeah, I like the splits here on the pie chart. I like that he's really been in all aspects of the show. I think this was a great season for Devon Walker. To me, this is like the positive trajectory that you want to see from a cast member, and I am confident that we're going to see it even higher next year. Also, he a couple sketches that I think we haven't really talked about very much, but are important sketches for him this year. The Lost Bag sketch that he did, where he was playing that character. It was a 10-to-1 sketch, and that to me was good for him to get a starring role there. His Club Shay Shay impression, where he was doing Shannon Sharp as a pre-tape, I think those are two really big moments that sketches. There was other sketches in those episodes I think we were talking about more, but still, like Devon was getting his voice in the show maybe more than we gave him credit for throughout the year. So I'm impressed with him. And you mentioned, that cut piece. I mean, we also had the DJ, like that was a runner, from the Kate McKinnon episode that we didn't even get to see, that was cut as well. So I think he's trying a lot of stuff. I think he's feeling more comfortable at the show. Look, at season 48, Saturday Night Live hired 4 stand-ups. Stand-ups traditionally have a harder hill to climb when it comes to getting familiar with sketch comedy. I think Marcello cracked through right away. He had the backing. He had the skills to be able to do it. I think this year, Devon Walker finally broke through from just being the stand-up comic to being a sketch comic. Whereas I don't know that Longfellow and Molly have yet. So I would say that Devon to me is closer to the Marcello from that, class than he is to what we're seeing from Longfellow and Molly. And I've been pretty impressed with him.
Agreed. I love to see a second-year rookie take big swings and have it make the show. So that Tim Scott was obviously a saving grace for his stat line. But yeah, the Lost Bag, that from Dakota Johnson, 10-to-1, 3 minutes, 11 seconds. He was on screen basically the whole sketch, let it, had Kenan come in to, kind of play the Kenan role. But other than that, Devon was really the star of that sketch from beginning to end. Where last year we were only talking about the HIV commercial, that sketch. I thought he was fantastic in. So that was his 5th longest appearance of his career. But we also saw that opening was at the Shane Gillis when he was at the table. And I feel like that kind of role, and SNL has definitely put confidence in him. Like they are confident in him. So Bill, I think we talked about, you were on the show with us last year and we got to Devon's slide. I think the 3 of us were just like, yeah, like pretty good year. Okay. So what about this year?
Yeah, I think that was the one we all struggled with the most last year. Where was he? And I think I said something to the effect of, was he going to find his lane? And he did. There's no greater sign of respect on SNL to be asked to bring back an impression of a person who's no longer in the zeitgeist. And Tim Scott has been out of the race for the Republican nomination since November. He pops up at these weird Trump rallies every now and then, but he's not really somebody that's being talked about a lot. And he brought it back 5 times. So, it reminds me of Fred with David Patterson. Just kept coming back and back because it was such a good impression. And and Devon had so many great moments. The subway platform or Waffle House too was a quieter moment with JAJ, but that was really a great showcase of his talents outside of impressions. But yeah, to see what he was able to do, his Strahan, as John mentioned, his Shannon Sharp, there's a lot of good to be seen here with Devon, and I think we'll only see him continue to move up.
But we have to
Draymond
talk about
Green
this, Bill. He could be Trump's running mate. So that would be huge for somebody who's not in the news cycle. They'll be in the news cycle constantly. So that's a huge X factor. They alluded to that in that cold open with Heidi being Kristi Noem. Like that could be huge for Heidi. So we know Mikey Day and JAJ going forward in election year, they're going to be all set. So that is a huge role that has nothing to do with casting for the show because they're already been solidified. We never got a real DeSantis on the show, and he could have been a huge player in the election and he ended up not being. So for Devon to grab this Tim Scott impression and not only just be somebody like, okay, we need to get one of our black male cast members to play a black male politician. He made that impression funny. He also did it well. So somebody who I thought coming in wouldn't be like a JAJ and doing this week to week made it really good. So, John, I mean, other than what I said about that being great for stats, like, could this be somebody who's on the cast for 3-4 years because of that, or at least because of his talents that he brings?
I think so. I mean, look, I think part of the reason why we didn't have a lot to say last year is because, Chris Redd left the show like as season 49 was starting. Sorry, season 48 was starting to ramp up. Like he wasn't intended on leaving the show. Other circumstances came in. He leaves the show last minute. And I'm pretty sure that Devon was a replacement for Chris Redd, and I'm not just saying it because they're two black men. Like I think that there was some changes that had to be made, and then they ended up adding 4 people. And I think when you are brought in, then there's like a little bit of an adjustment period and trying to figure out where the place is and how to write for him. And he is not Chris Redd. He's a very different person and different cast member than Chris Redd, and it takes time for him to figure out his place on the show. And like I said, I feel so much more confident in his trajectory from now on. Now, there is a huge pivot point here in his career, which is if Tim Scott is the vice presidential candidate with Trump in the fall, Devon Walker's exposure is tremendous. Because they're naturally, I don't think there's a VP debate planned right now in real life. So that may take place during SNL season. The potential of seeing, him working with JJ and 2 younger cast members on the show and just having them interact in the same scene more often. I think there's a lot to go on. And I think, Maya Rudolph was not a cast member anymore, so having Kamala around, wasn't really something that worked to find their role. And we really only saw Punkie as Kamala once this year, sort of as a background thing, just to have for her in place. But I think if Tim Scott is around, there's enough comedy to mine there between the Trump and Tim Scott impressions. So I'm excited to see, is this going to work? Is this going to happen for Devon?
And if you're Devon Walker, you kind of just being like, well, I hope Trump picks Tim Scott because it'll be great for my SNL career. I mean, Beck Bennett played Mike Pence 22 times. So, and Mike Pence was not a character in our political life that was, exciting enough to do a lot of SNL sketches. But I think Devon's Tim Scott is definitely worthy of, leading a sketch should he be the VP nominee. So let's move on to number 12, John.
All right, here we go. Top 12 we're getting into here, Mike.
Top 12, also someone in a league of their own because it's Michael Che. So I'll make the obligatory SNL by the numbers joke. Why does Michael Che not get the screen time as Colin Jost? So his screen time ended up being 1 hour, 21 minutes, 22 seconds. So if we look at the rank in the cast, it's still 11th. So he's right in the middle of the pack, basically on all my stats, other than the specific portions of the show. We did see him, episode 1, Pete Davidson in the PDD Princes of Comedy. So that was a great little Che nugget we got because we don't get to see Che outside the desk too much. I wish we would because I think it's great. But other than that, it was 20 episodes and a weekend update. And there was a thing that I saw on social media often that Che was doing a lot, I think more than usual, which was just like referencing the reaction of the crowd. I mean, he's known for that, but this year it really was like, I think he said twice in the last 3 shows, like, okay, I won't do that on air. So is there any fatigue that you see, John, from Michael Che? I mean, we're all on board, Jost and Che, season 50, but is he over this job? Let's just be real.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I don't know if he's over the job. I mean, I think if he's the type of person that if he was over it, he would have left.
Okay, I'll rephrase it just for your response. Are his best kind of like years behind him? Is he phoning it in, or has he gotten better? I mean, I'm a huge Michael Che guy, so I'm not afraid to say it. But is this his affect on the desk, I think, was a little bit more subdued, but I think at the same time was going for more shock jokes, which I think he's great at.
I love it. I think Che's absolutely hilarious, and I love that he says things that nobody else is willing to say. Like, that is what Saturday Night Live was made for, It's made for that type of thing where you could push boundaries a little bit. And look, especially nowadays where it is harder to say things and sensitivity's up everywhere. And, on Saturday Night Live, as long as like you don't cross a line, wherever that line may be, I think that you can push the line, and Che's very good at that. So that's why I appreciate having Michael Che on the show. I still think that at the end of the day, whenever this time comes for Jost and Che, we're going to look back on them very, very fondly throughout their career. But yeah, I've been championing the hate towards the way he approaches his own jokes. I think he undercuts them all the time. I don't know why he needs to do that. It is like the equivalent of adding a button to a sketch where the sketch is brought to you by whatever. Like all of his jokes on Weekend Update are brought to you by his own hate for his own jokes. So stop it. Like it doesn't make any sense. You don't need to do it. We're perfectly fine. If the joke doesn't work in the house in 8H, there are millions of people watching at home laughing at your joke. And I wish I could just be like, stop.
I'm so glad you said that, John, because that's the best part about having someone be edgy in the cast. And that was my fear. I think I said like a year ago at this time, is if we didn't get him to stay and he left Update, was them trying to play it really safe with a new team because they don't want new faces getting hate from, people who don't watch the show and, being angry at them. So yeah, he says a joke, whether it bombs or not, but then he's just like using his eraser and, grumbling and talking over, Joe's setup. And I'm like, don't do that, because like John said, like your joke killed probably to at least 50% of the audience at home who are laughing on their couch. So he did lead the cast in screen time twice this season. So we had a lot of long updates second half of the year. So Che was the cast screen time leader in the Kate McKinnon episode and the Ryan Gosling episode. Bill, somebody who's watched for as long as you have, I'm sure you have a lot to say about the history of Update and who your favorites are. First of all, I want you to tell me, are Jost and Che your top one or two teams of all time? And just, your overall thoughts on his season this year.
Well, first, a question for you, Mike. Why does he get so much less screen time than Jost?
That's a great question.
Have you ever been asked that?
Yeah, I actually love it when we see that in the comments on Instagram and stuff. It's like, why? They do the same job, right?
Mike, that's how you know we have a new listener. Is whenever
that's
somebody
right.
says that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think it's fun. It should be on the SNN FAQ. Why does Colin Jost get more screen time than Michael Che?
Before season 50, we're gonna put that up, and we're gonna put like a big sign that says like no to skit and yes to sketch.
Yes.
But to answer your question, they are definitely top three, possibly top two. I won't rank them at this point, but I'll say that for sure.
Do you have a number one? Let's just do a number one. Do you have it?
Dennis Miller is still my favorite. I think he changed the game when Weekend Update was struggling mightily in the mid 80s, and he came in with a different take on it. So everybody you've seen since Dennis has taken a little piece of what he's done on Update and made it their own. Before that, it was more of just like, we're imitating Tom Brokaw, or we're imitating, Walter Cronkite. It was just more of a straight newsman kind of thing, where Dennis took it to a comedian's level, and it's just gone from there. So yeah, Dennis is probably still number one for me. But yeah, I don't know. After that, Norm and then Jost Che would be fighting out for second place.
All right, John, move on to number 11.
Oh, they're gonna ask me for my update rankings.
Okay, yeah, give them to me.
Yeah, I actually am more fond of Dennis than a lot of people as well. I do appreciate what he brought to the show. It is like the same shtick over and over again, but you can argue that Norm did that too. But for me, it's Norm with a bullet, number one, and then number two is Seth. But I probably feel the way about Seth that Bill does about Dennis. Is just like, that's, this is the guy I grew up with and the guy I love seeing, and then it would be Jost and Che. So yeah, for sure. Can't discount what they're doing at the show. Longevity, a huge factor. And like I said, I do love 99.9% of the things that Michael Che brings to Saturday Night Live, and I think we would miss him. But That's just that little thing that bothers me, and I hope it's gone in season 50.
Yeah, and mentioning Norm just once more. I mean, he's my favorite. I adore Norm. I watch Norm clips probably daily. He's just so dear to my heart. But if Che could do, I saw someone in the chat say it is like just do the joke, own the bomb. It's that you can get a second laugh that way. So Norm did jokes that went ice cold in the room, and he could just stare. He could just go to the next joke, and he did not care. He enjoyed it. I mean, he said it before. So,
but you know what? You know who does that now sometimes? Colin
Jost.
Yeah, Colin does that now. So it's weird when Che tells the more biting joke, but won't do that.
And John and I had this great conversation a couple weeks ago about this very topic. And, you know, it's every one of these anchors has some kind of tell. Seth just kind of did the side eye when something went wrong with the joke. But he kept it to himself. And that's one of the things I admire about Seth's time on the show. But yeah, Che has leaned into this Colin Quinn-esque, like, that's what Colin Quinn is remembered for. You didn't like that one, huh? Oh, let's see how you feel about the next one. And it's just too much. It's way, way too much. 100% what John has said. I love everything Che. He pushes boundaries like nobody else on the show. Hope he stays for a while, but yeah, please stop.
Colin Quinn on the bingo card. We got him. All right. So we're going to go to maybe the most exciting thing in the room over at NBC, over at 30 Rock, their shiny new toy, who they're really pushing forward. We did talk about it a little bit last week on By the Numbers, covering the Gyllenhaal episode, because once again, Marcello Hernández made it to the desk. So we had the joke swap. So we ended up only having the one correspondent piece. It was the cicadas, Marcello and Kenan. So Marcello Kenan pairing is, maybe not as popular as the Dismukes of the world, but it is a pairing. And we saw Marcello a few times on Update this year, like last year, but he is having like the biggest launch. So his screen time up 29% after a strong rookie year. And we've already covered Molly, Devon, and Longfellow. So we have the season 48 rookie winner, Marcello Hernández, 11th in the power ranking. He averages 60.6. So he's right above that line of like good episode average. Marcello is right there as a featured player. He had 60 appearances. Also, like Devon, perfect attendance, never been shut out. 1 hour, 15 minutes, 44 seconds. So 12th in the cast. So we saw, James Austin Johnson's rookie year. He ended up finishing in the power rankings after that amazing year, 12th. So screen time numbers and a lot of those cold opens that really helped out JAJ that didn't help Marcello. Marcello kind of did it the hard way. So we didn't see a political impression or really recurring character from him, but we saw him everywhere else. So again, a great pie chart we see here. We saw him a lot with Chloe Fineman, 30 shared segments. He had 2 live from New York's, 5 update appearances, and he was in 2 promos. So we don't see the featured players in promos as much. So that does say a lot too about who SNL is putting forward. So John, what can we say about this cast member who's really like putting in a lot of work? Only in Bargatze's episode was he's at 4 seconds. Everywhere else, he was pretty good.
What were those 4 seconds in Bargatze? Because they kept his shutout streak alive, which is pretty good.
Yeah, let me check real quick. Give me your thoughts on Marcello.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's the Gen Pop fave at this point, where like everyone, all the casual people who are watching are like fascinated with Marcello Hernández. Obviously, from a background perspective, he appeals to many different demographics and represents a lot of people who aren't usually represented on the show. So I think it makes sense, why so many people are rooting for him. He has a very large following on social media. So naturally his sketches, both on YouTube and social platforms, are going to get play a lot. So I could see why the show is pushing him. I do think he's had a very successful sophomore season, a really good one, going back to the Bad Bunny episode where they leaned on him a lot as being the cast, sort of guide. Like you think of like a good modern example is like Heidi Gardner with Travis Kelce. Well, I think like, Marcello Hernández was Bad Bunny's guide, if you're not going to include Pedro Pascal in that category. So between the monologue and the Age of Discovery, a huge part of that episode. He had some other interesting sketches, throughout the season, including the nightclub sketch from Momoa, Tiny Ass Bag, that sketch he did with Ego. But I do think that, we're going to remember this season for his Weekend Update appearances that he did, where he started to take these, roles that would traditionally go to Longfellow or as expected. Worked with Kenan a lot. And then also the Immigrant Dad talk show that he did in the Rami Youssef episode. That one, to me, was really representative of the type of comedy that could be a little bit different than other cast members that we haven't seen as much on the show in the last, let's say, decade. So his prospects are through the roof. And I think that there is a very good chance that next year he is in the top 5 of the power rankings.
Bold prediction. Love it. The 4 seconds were in Lake Beach. So it was a pre-tape. We never saw him live, but he kept the no shutout streak going by appearing in Lake Beach for 4 seconds. So kind of like we saw Dismukes appear for only a moment in the Age of Discovery from Bad Bunny. So I think, yeah, like what John said, multifaceted because of the youth, can speak Spanish, and is, SNL, speaking of the lack of diversity and for Black cast members, think about the lack of diversity for Spanish speaking cast members. So we never really saw that emerge from Melissa. We got like bits and pieces here and there. We had that sketch popular with Selena Gomez, the That's It sketch, right? Or no, I'm thinking of Marcello right there. So the talk show that we had with Selena Gomez. But Bill, so you've seen these featured players and the studs and the duds. We have a certified stud here with Marcello's stat line. So what can you tell me about him?
Yeah, as someone who drafted him in season 48 for our cast draft, I knew early on, obviously. No, it's really interesting to see. And as we get into the top 10 in a second, like the diversity on this show from even just 10 or 15 years ago is really heartwarming in a lot of ways. And Marcello is one of those leaders of the pack. And yeah, he just filled so many different roles. The only thing I would like to see more from him is some more impressions, whether it's political or not. I'd love to see what he can do in the impression department. I know SNL doesn't lean on that as much unless they roll out, one of these parades. But yeah, I'd love to see what he did with that. But yeah, he was consistent all year long. Did like his Weekend Update pieces. Again, as I said with Longfellow, I wish the crazy dress up stuff had gone to Longfellow and we got to see more of Marcello as himself. I loved his baseball Weekend Update sketch in season 48. So yeah, I would love to see that more often, but yeah, it's great to see somebody in only their second season do so well.
Shout out to Ellis for reminding me that it's "das good" and "das sad." So "das it" was not that far off for that tag in that sketch from Melissa with Selena, and then Tiny Ass Bags with Adam Driver and Olivia Rodrigo. So, and also Ellis mentioning that I like to see him work with his fellow 48 newcomers. I've mentioned this before. I kind of get this warm, fuzzy feeling if I see like Dismukes and Punkie together. Just those kind of pairings, because they're always trying to make their own way. So when you see them kind of together, I don't know. That's just me. I like it. But John, you said maybe top 5 next year. That means he'd be going against the Heidis, the Egos, the Mikeys. And, let's take Jost out of it. But what can he do next year to get there before we move on from this slide?
Yeah, it's a bold take also, because I know like JJ is probably going to move into the top 5 naturally because of the election. So I like realistically, I'm not sure, but I think he has a chance, and they could really continue to build upon him, especially as he becomes a repertory player. Like I said, a lot of confidence in him. I think one of the things that Mike, I don't know if you saw this as well, but when we were there in person, and this is something that I think you can only see in person without actually seeing it on screen, is like, he has so much energy just as a human being, Like he is like running around talking to people. He's always doing something, never still. Like it almost reminds me of like Sherry O'Terry or like Martin Short or something like that, where he's just like Bugs Bunny, like running around everywhere. And I don't know if that Bugs Bunny's right analogy, but just someone in that world.
Topical.
Yes, someone in that world. But anyways, yeah, he's running around all the time. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, you do have all this energy. I think that may be the path forward in terms of like little coaching tips. Is like, some of the things that he did to elicit this large amount of screen time this year was desk pieces or like Immigrant Dad Talk Show. He's sitting at a table talking to somebody. I think I want to see some of that energy in the sketches to give us pieces that are moving around the scene and stuff like that, because he definitely has it.
Yeah, there's a story that I want to tell on air. I don't think I should. He uses some colorful language, but after John and I were in New York, the next day, did my last sightseeing, I ended up at the Comedy Cellar, and I did run into an SNL writer, and they did mention, I'm not going to say what it was, but that Marcello is excelling in a lot of areas in his life. So his success in the show, I guess, is translating. He's very popular. As John mentioned, when we were at the after party and even on stage, John, remember he photobombed our picture with Rami. Like he was just like, He was literally everywhere. So I guess, Marcello is doing just great. So I want to keep seeing that.
So, I'm afraid to ask what other stats you're keeping on these cast members, Mike.
Oh, no. All right. Let's go to the top 10. We're on track right here. We're doing well.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good here. Wow. Top 10 cast members from season 49. Mike, who's up next?
So a cast member that came in with a bang, kind of cooled off, and then we saw.
Are you going back to Marcello here with the whole bang?
No. I didn't mention any of that stuff. I just, I was just being cagey and, whatever. All right. So this cast member was somebody that I think just came in a way that was polarizing. People were saying like they didn't like her, and people were like, she's the greatest thing since Kate McKinnon. And now I think it's leveled out where we can see Sarah Sherman just be a great cast member and doesn't have to rely on any tricks or shock value. So that when we do get it, we appreciate it and say like, oh, that's so Sarah Sherman, instead of being like, oh, that's Sarah Sherman. So I'm very happy that she's in the top 10. So we have some really great women in the cast, and Sarah Sherman as a third-year player now, remaining with JAJ as that upgraded cast member, as at a 62.8. So if you look back and say, did I see more Marcello or Sarah? Well, Sarah actually put up a better stat line. So let's read through those. 64 appearances. That's 7th in the cast. We saw Sarah a lot this year. So 64 appearances over 20 shows, never shut out, and never really had a bad episode. So we only had a 45 seconds with Kristen Wiig, which we, saw, a lot of cameos and things like that. So those stats are a little different. But we saw her in live sketches a ton, a huge pre-tape with Dua Lipa, which I thought was a bright spot, in my opinion, in a lesser show. Top co-star Heidi Gardner, 35 shared segments, 2 live from New York's, 4 update appearances. I think I kind of forgot about them until I was writing that, ballot earlier. But we saw her as, the illegitimate son of Colin Jost. We saw Flacco's widow. We saw, a lot of interesting things that weren't just Jost roast, but still were Jost roast. 3 promo appearances, Emma Stone, Dakota Johnson, and Ryan Gosling. We saw her there on home base. And an hour, 25 minutes, and 6 seconds puts her 9th in the cast in screen time. Bill Kenney, are you a Shermanator?
I am a Shermanator. I'm encouraged by some of what we've seen. I feel like even though she's in the same spot she was in last year, that there's some really good stuff. Her classmate in JAJ both had similar problems in different ways. We were worried they were going to get pigeonholed into their personas. And as we'll probably talk about later with JAJ, I think she's broken away from that, and that's great. However, I wish we saw a little bit more of the squirm stuff this year. We didn't get a whole lot other than Shrimp Tower And if you want to include Pongo, I guess like there wasn't enough of the shock factor. I just hope she doesn't lose that persona completely going into her 4th season. But overall, I think she had a pretty decent season. Had a lot of fun stuff at the update desk, which we wish we saw another Sarah News. But other than that, yeah, I think it was a pretty good season for Sarah.
Yeah, she did finish 10th last year in the power rankings. I think I was saying last year that I loved Punkie's improvement in her acting. I would say that about Sarah this year. And Pongo is a good one because, you know, she was the straight role. She was the person that we are identifying with. Everyone else is crazy and they're all on Pongo's side. And Sarah is just suffering because of Pongo. So I would say that about Sarah. And yeah, finishing top 10 once again. So I just feel like she's less niche because we saw 16% more screen time for her with a little bit dip in appearances. So we're seeing her for a longer amount. John Schneider, Sarah Sherman, your take.
Yeah, I think the thing that's tough for me with Sarah is that I don't think she had a good year for live sketches overall. I mean, like the vehicles that she drove for live sketches this year, Glamgina, yeah, she had the Trick or Treat sketch where she played Fran Drescher, Fugliana, and the Snake Eyes sketch were really some of the pieces that she largely contributed to. And some of those were good, but I just, in terms of quantity for a second, very low for somebody who has a very clear, distinct voice on the show. And it's still bizarre to me that for somebody who came in, had a particular brand of comedy, that we are seeing it, we're seeing it basically like only in versions of pieces where people's like heads are getting cut off, or where she's making fun of Colin Jost. And like those are fine. And like it's okay to me. Like if people, I think maybe a little bit more of a casual audience thing, but if people like the weekend update pieces, at least it's different versions of characters that are going at Jost. Like I'll take that over it being the same, you know, thing every single time next to Colin. But they don't always click and do have slight diminishing returns. So if your live sketches aren't crushing all the time, or at least there's not enough live sketch material there, and the weekend update is experiencing diminishing returns, and I'll say like the RFK one brainworm thing, I really didn't care for. So it wasn't like exactly a great way to end that for me. Then I have to resort to like what I'm looking for was the good this year. And those were the pre-tapes. I do think that she really has put together some nice pre-tapes on the show. And I like the idea that we could be going into a season wondering if we're going to get a very solid Sarah Sherman pre-tape. So like the Untold Battle of the Sexes, I think was a really strong piece. From the Momoa episode, the Pongo sketch, probably best commercial parody in a very long time. Shrimp Tower, I absolutely loved, so ridiculous. And then the Anomalous Man, I think had a lot to it as well. So, you know, those 4 sketches, I think you're talking about, you know, 20% of the episodes this year had a pretty good Sarah Sherman pre-tape. So again, baseline, solid. But I would have thought 3 years ago that Sarah Sherman would be a top 5 cast member at this point among power rankings. I don't know that she has that ceiling at this point.
I'll agree with the ceiling point. I think we maybe got a little too excited in the fan base about her because of the, you know, the titans of women in SNL history leaving and then some new exciting energy coming in. It's like, this is going to be a new era of the female of SNL, and because she's so unlike Kate and Adie and Cecily, so it's just something fresh. But I'll make a pretty controversial take here. Is that like I don't really care for the Sarah Sherman update pieces. Kind of never have. I mean, I'm always excited to see what's next, but it's not my favorite stuff. But like John said, I love the pre-tapes. So we saw like the, you know, Chucky pre-tape, you know, a couple years ago, and this year she led the cast in screen time for pre-tapes. So not in appearances, she had 14 because she doesn't do a ton of voice work like J.A.J. would, but she had the most screen time in pre-tapes. So not a good lane to claim, but a good solid lane to maybe get some clicks, because I feel like those pre-tapes online work well, and they're always very like exciting concepts. So like say like a Scooby-Doo, you know what you're gonna get until you don't. So Chucky the doll, you know what you're gonna get, see Chucky, but then this happens. So she's does have that like bait and switch energy.
I'll also say, I think if she only did CJ Rossitano, like Colin Jost Jr., this year, I think we would all be like, that was amazing. More Sarah on Update. But like,
Yeah, that was my favorite one.
Right, exactly. And I think in a way she almost got overexposed because it was harder, even though like they're different characters, it's still hard to differentiate the style between them. So I think that's where it's a little bit tough here. So I agree with you, Mike.
And just since I mentioned it earlier, we talked about Devon Walker, Michael Longfellow, cut for time, or cut after dress, I should say, on Update, and the Rama Yusuf show that John and I were at. That was the episode that we had Chloe Fineman doing TikTok videos, and then Sarah as the Owl's widow. So, if I can look back at that as like a comedic analyst, which I don't claim to be, I wouldn't give it the highest marks. It was just okay. It wasn't terrible. But you see that Devon and Michael piece and go, okay, well, like it's something different where we got Chloe doing what Chloe does. I thought was actually a pretty good Chloe Fineman piece, as was the JoJo Siwa one. But when I see Sarah get the desk, I want it to feel a little bit more earned and not just like, oh, this works, let's put it on the show. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And I do wonder also if PDD, not for their sketches, but for the sketches that they write into the show, if Chloe Troast is cannibalizing Sarah, where now they have a new muse, like somebody to write through. And before maybe that they would be willing to write a sketch around Sarah's thing. Like it was really like PDD, Bula, and Sarah, they were a crew, but now like there's an extra element in the mix, and I have to wonder if, even though they're very different in style, Chloe Troast's addition to the cast has affected Sarah Sherman's live sketch quantity.
Right, because we didn't see Chloe in PDD, but we've seen some Sarah since she's been there. And also, Sarah had the lowest number of appearances in the first sketch. So out of 20 shows, Sarah was in the post-monologue live sketch only twice. So that means that's lower than Marcello, Troast, Longfellow, Punkie, Molly, Dismukes, who are all like 5 or below, or Dismukes is 6, Bowen 6. We saw Kenan, Ego, Heidi a ton in that spot. So any commentary, Bill, on that? Like, I've recently been promoting that stat on the show of like first sketch and 10-1. I've been categorizing those stats as well, instead of just the macro. So Sarah Sherman being in only 2 of those, and that's for any duration. Do you think that says anything about her usage on the show?
Wow, that's interesting. Do you have any thoughts on why that would possibly be? I don't know what would lead to something like that being the case.
I mean, in the past, this is why I'm going to you, Bill.
Well, I do have
I threw your question right back at you.
It was 3 minutes and 15 seconds. That was the total. That's only accounts for 3.8% of her screen time all year was in that first sketch. I've also pointed out on this program that sketch leans longer, so it's easier to rack up screen time in that first sketch. They're usually lowest common denominator, pageants, game shows, TV. So kind of it can work for everyone. It's not niche where Sarah's niche. I mean, that's kind of my only take, but John, please.
Well, I don't know if it applies as much to this season, but I will say, like, I think that when she is in sketches, there's generally a larger set piece involved, or maybe it's a makeup, maybe it's costume, whatever it is. And those things, there needs a long lead time and a long post time. So I think where you're going to strategically, conventionally place Sarah in an episode won't necessarily be like right after the monologue. Maybe like post update where there's a long break, or maybe it would be that's like, the second or third segment into the show, where if there's a sketch that really involves not just like people sitting around a table talking, you may want to put her in that.
Are you saying, like, do you have an example of a Sarah live sketch that would take a long time to set up?
I think it applies probably more to 48, where we were getting like the Michael B. Jordan like roller coaster sketch as an example, where you have like the big gums and stuff like that. Like those types of things take a while to apply. you know, and it's the same thing, right? Like if you're gonna put, like, you just have to think about the show from a production level sometimes, where if you're gonna put JJ in Trump makeup, he's probably not gonna be in the monologue, right? Because
Right.
there's just no way to put him there. So sometimes I just wonder that, you know, I don't think Sarah is naturally built for the first sketch of the night, especially if she's gonna have pieces that are more her style.
Agreed. Let's go to number 9.
All right, really getting up here, Mike. This will be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. So, John, can you tell the people if they haven't watched the postseason roundtable who finished in the MVP voting?
Sure. You want the? Should I tell you the top 5? Well, you know, the listeners really felt that Marcello Hernández was the MVP. We got a lot of votes for that, but in my heart, I have a hard time arguing against Andrew Dismukes as the MVP of season 49, and, you know, fittingly enough, at 9 here in the power ranking.
Where did he finish in the voting? Did you tell me?
I think 4th. I think he finished 4th
Okay.
in that list.
All right. So, I mean, I feel like he's like, well, you said John was on with me for the Jake episode, and you said that you were accused of stumping for Andrew Dismukes. Can you confirm this rumor?
This is very true. Yeah, no, I mean, people have DM'd me before and have been like, "Oh, you're a really big fan of Dismukes," and I'm like, "Well, like I call it like I see it. He's killing it on the show."
Yeah, and this is something I told Dismukes was that his live sketch numbers were great. So maybe Andrew Dismukes is not the cast member of the 21st century, 2024, but he's the cast member for Saturday Night Live, which is still a show on the air after 49 years, which is a live comedy sketch show at the end of the day at its most basic definition, other than just, you know, a variety show. So for Andrew Dismukes at number 9, it's a 63.1 power ranking. He was 7th, tied with Bowen for appearances at 71, logged an hour, 25 minutes, and 18 seconds, 8th in the cast for screen time. And I mentioned earlier, just to be funny, you know, his 4 seconds in the Bad Bunny episode in that pre-tape Age of Discovery. Other than that, Andrew Dismukes crushed this season. And he crushed the season the hardest with sketches that he was the lead-in that I think we look back on this season and talk about the most fondly. So I won't take it away from Bill. I will let him tell you some of the great Dismukes pieces we saw this year, because I could probably at least list 4. So I want to hear from Bill and John.
Well, I think John was on the Dismukes for MVP earlier than most. You convinced me in a lot of ways as we moved along, because it's not just about where they ended up ranking, but what are you going to remember from season 49 of SNL a year from now, 2 years from now? Dismukes is in at least 3 or 4 of the top 10 that you'll be talking about in 2025, 2026. I mean, beep, beep. Got to start with that, right? That was such a tour de force to see him in that. But my favorite with him was Jumanji, just for the fact of seeing him spar with this all-time cast member in Kristen Wiig and talking about being in Jumanji and trying to explain this nonsensical world of, like, that was great. And then, you know, we got the engagement. I don't want to take everything, but, you know, the engagement with Gosling was such a quieter piece overall, but to see his reactions to Gosling in that episode, in that sketch, were just so great. So we sat here a year ago talking about our genuine concern for Dismukes and was he going to be able to bounce back? He bounced back, and he bounced back hard. So glad to see it. And I don't know if he's my MVP, but he's definitely top 2 or 3.
Right. Dismukes ended up logging an hour, 4 minutes, and 5 seconds of just live sketch time. So that does not include monologue, cold open, or weekend update. Those are separated in these stats. So you'll see the pie chart. He has, you know, a lot of green. That's live sketch time. So I'll just read these because we're going to get these cast members, but these are all the vets of the cast. And then, you know, Dismukes, who came in 46. So it's Heidi, Mikey, Bowen, Kenan, Dismukes. Those are your live sketch players. So you need to write a piece that's going to be 4 minutes, 10 seconds on SNL. it's going to be written by Dismukes or someone's putting Dismukes in them. So I just love to see that. Maybe I'm a bit traditionalist with my SNL watching. I will highlight other aspects of the show, but that is huge for me to be able to do these slice of life pieces that could have been in any era and been successful. And that's what he's done. So I just am super stoked to talk about him in that way. John, let's stump for your boy here.
Yeah, I mean, look, another couple of factors here that you can't see in the numbers are that he writes a lot of the pieces that he's in. So he's able to contribute his voice to the sketches and tell the sketch through his voice. And the second is, and I think I said this on another podcast, I forget which one, but it is such an advantage to have a reverence for the show that you are on. Imagine wanting to be in the NFL, but you never watched a football game in your life, and your skills get you there, but you don't really know the game. And then there's football IQ that factors in there. Andrew Dismukes has SNL IQ. Not only was he a writer for a season or two before he was a cast member, but he also grew up loving the show, wanted to model his comedy after cast members that were on Saturday Night Live, and now look at the show, who is now letting him do his thing, and you see the results of that. So, the reason why I root for cast members and I encourage like new cast members, like that's sometimes I'll ask especially when we get to interview some cast members, like, who were your favorite cast members growing up? Like, what were the sketches that you like to watch? And I just think it makes such a difference to understand these people and why older eras of the show had an impact on them. So all of that to say, Andrew Dismukes had a fantastic season at the show. Bill mentioned some of the sketches, but truly, I do feel like not only were these sketches so impactful on us as a niche of a niche, but they were impactful on the general audience. I saw casual fans of the show be like, who is this Andrew Dismukes guy? He's so hilarious. Oh yeah, that's like I would see in the comments on Instagram of sketches of his, like, oh yeah, that's Andrew Dismukes. He's so funny. Like, these are the types of things that are happening this year that weren't happening in previous years. So I think he's becoming more recognizable by the general public. He's always going to be like our guy a little bit, but I still think that he's finding his way and his path on the show. And I absolutely love that. And the other thing is that I think it's so great that his sketches are happening at the top of the show. Like, think about the last few episodes where you got the cookies sketch that just happened in Gyllenhaal. You had the engagement sketch, which wasn't a sketch that he wrote, but still a sketch that he starred in the Gosling episode, Jumanji in the Wiig episode. Like, that's just the last month of shows. And I would say he is a major reason why I feel like the second half of season 49 has improved tremendously from the first half of season 49. So, overall, I think these numbers are fantastic. I'm perfectly fine with him being the live sketch guy because it's what we came to the show for. So let him continue to do that. If I was a listener of this podcast, Mike, my only question would be you guys are stumping for Dismukes a lot, but how come he's at 9? Why isn't he higher up in the power rankings? So can you answer that for a potential listener?
I mean, it's more of a comment, really. You guys are doing stumping for Dismukes. I want to just, I have it in front of me, John, before I dive into that. An hour, sorry, not an hour. I'm gonna go screen time average in his seasons just to show you the Dismukes arc, because he's been on the cast, since season 46, wrote in season 45 and 44. Logged a few appearances here and there, but wasn't part of the cast. So his screen time average, because the seasons did have different number of episodes, I don't want to distort the data. So 1 minute 47 in his rookie year, 46. 2 minutes 46, his second year featured. 3 minutes 34, his first season repertory, season 48. And 4 minutes 16 this year. So that's somebody who's going from the 1 minute to the 2 minute to the 3 minute to the 4 minute. Maybe we'll see 5 minutes average next year, which is very difficult to do. You got to be the Mikey, Heidi, Bowen of this cast, or be the Cecily, Kate, 80 of the previous cast to do that average. Because we talked about him being niche sometimes and having a kind of like a cult following because, people want to say little gatekeep, Dismukes is for me. I get him. You don't get Dismukes like I do. But I think that he's opened up that fan base a little bit, where you can have a Jumanji, and most people, especially millennials, are familiar with Jumanji and can relate to that sketch, or the go-kart sketch, or those type of pieces. So I also, my remark on Dismukes would be, a lot of episodes that I look back on this year, I identified the Dismukes sketch. So whether you liked Adam Driver's episode or not, I'm like, well, that's the beep beep episode for me. So I think that's a good sign as far as the recollection. So let's dive in, John, on why is he ninth? So we gotta look at who's ahead of him and kind of identify what the missing ingredient is.
Sure.
First off, with no research, I would say he doesn't play politics on the show. Like, we haven't seen him lead a cold open, I don't think, ever. So that's going to be 5-6 minutes a night. He's just kind of not in the picture. We don't see him in monologues either. We don't see him play himself a lot. We saw him do it once on Update. That was kind of it. So that would be my knee-jerk reaction there. But the consistency is good. Let me look who's ahead of him. I just feel like it's the screen time. It's so we have him seventh in appearances, 8th in screen time. So he's right there. So it makes sense that he's 9th. And maybe recurrence. So we don't see him do a lot of recurring characters, not a lot of Live from New York. So things that are, the power ranking kind of works when I was developing it, was trying to reward people of all styles, because someone like Dismukes logs a lot of live time, which is more beneficial than a pre-tape time because it's longer pieces, but also it rewards recurring characters, Live from New York, prime time. So a Dismukes sketch does not necessarily have to be top of the show. I don't know. Is that a good answer?
It's a great answer. But it just goes to show you that there's not one way to be successful on Saturday Night Live. So I think it's a great answer. Before we wrap up Dismukes, I just want to shout out a couple of other sketches of his that I think people are not going to talk about in terms of the Dismukes lens. But I'd say like Loud Table, the last sketch of the night from the Sydney Sweeney episode, that is a sketch because there were so many other Dismukes sketches that people won't talk about as much, but is so great and, could be on a best of his. And, a lot of people remember this sketch as being Io Edebiri's sketch, but Dismukes had a large hand in writing the school hypnotist sketch that Io did at the end of the night. And that to me, again, is a character that he develops probably, with Io through their love of Saturday Night Live. And that only exists because they watched previous eras of the show. So just so great for them. And, final point is just, if you're going to talk about Andrew Dismukes this season, I think you have to talk about his new writing partner on the show, August White, who really worked really hard with him on a lot of these sketches. And just can't wait to see what he produces next. I honestly the thing I'm looking forward to most every single week is, are we going to get a Dismukes sketch?
Agreed. That's what I shout out, the memorability of them. And I did mention this with Punkie's slide that, they're at the same level as far as their season count, and that Punkie's only had twice that she's 5 minute plus. Dismukes has had 18. So he's had an 11-minute night in the Molly Shannon and 10-minute night with Michael B. Jordan last year. And then for this season, Momoa, Gyllenhaal, Io, and Brolin, and Pete Davidson were all in his top 10 highest screen time. So he has really stepped up a ton. So this is a fun one to talk about, guys. Let's go to number 8.
Absolutely. All right. So now we have to see all the people that are ahead of Andrew Dismukes. Oh, okay, let's do it.
You need to take a break, John. We can.
Is the show over yet? We just talked about the MVP. All right, let's keep going. Who's at number 8, Mike?
So number 8 is someone that I am fascinated to look back on stat-wise. Obviously, she's still in the cast as we speak, but somebody that SNL really tried to figure out, and I think they did this year, John. I think you've said the same thing. It's Chloe Fineman, 82 appearances. So this is somebody who took some voice work over from Cecily. So when you hear a female voice in a sketch and a voiceover, it's usually going to be Heidi or Chloe. Before, it probably was going to be Cecily almost always. So an hour, 24 and 10 seconds. That was Chloe's screen time. That puts her 10th in the cast. But again, 82 appearances. That's 4th in the cast. So we've seen Chloe and John that night, a couple weeks ago, when she logged how many appearances? 9?
Yeah, 9 segment appearances. Very rare to do in modern times.
Crazy. So that episode alone is going to get her that appearance number up, obviously, in one night, nine appearances. That gets her to 4.1 appearances per episode. And somebody, again, who just quietly rose to that level in the cast. I would say the style is nowhere near Mikey Day, but somebody who now the cast like really relies on heavily to plug into a sketch. I mean, I think that's fair. We don't talk about a lot like Chloe's huge moments in sketches, but she is in a ton of them. So top co-star again, Heidi Gardner. Once we get to Heidi's slide, we'll know why she's popping up on this aspect every time. Chloe Fineman's screen time, though, on average, it did dip 16.5%. Appearances did go down. So 8th in the power ranking this year. An appearance on Update 3 times. So the Adam Driver episode, Rami Youssef episode, and Dua Lipa episode, that JoJo Siwa one. So fascinating case, somebody who's an impressionist, who's now kind of gone to a different level, would you say, John?
Absolutely. Look, my take on Chloe this season, Mike, is that I think that something happened over the holidays that was a pivot point for her, where I believe her second half of this season is the best we've seen of Chloe Fineman. Because if you go back to the first half, I think it was very similar to stuff we've seen before. You know, you had the Britney Spears Woman and Me auditions, the What's in the Kiln sketch that we got, this the Save the Last Dance, Julia Stiles piece, like all these things, Big Dumb Cups that we saw from, recurred from Amy Schumer's episode. These are the things that, we got used to seeing Chloe on the show. And I felt like she finally, 5 years into the show, 4.5 years in, found a groove for herself that really worked, both in her utility roles and the roles she was given in the second half of the year. I think her sketch, starting with the detective sketch with Sydney Sweeney, where they were both playing, those like people with the phones and stuff in the police station, with the Hooters waitress sketch that she wrote the same episode for Sydney Sweeney, the TikToker on Weekend Update, JoJo Siwa. Even like her Pilates sketch with Kristen Wiig's episode, I think there were moments in the second half of the season that I don't think we gave her enough due for how well she put herself in these roles in the second half of the season. So I think the quantity's there. The show clearly trusts her, but I think the show has trusted her for a long time. It's finally taken to this point to say that I understand why Chloe can be a very successful cast member on Saturday Night Live. And I'm actually very impressed with her second half of the year.
Agreed. Chloe is just somebody who I'm looking at the rundown right now and all these quick appearances, but like 3 minutes in that bike trail sketch. Like, Bill, when you see someone's got to play that role, like, I don't think Chloe Fineman had a lot of lines that could elicit laughs, yet someone has to do it. Does it come down to what I just said? Someone has to do it, or is Chloe Fineman good at doing that? Like the bike trail sketch, we have Mikey Day kind of being the leader, but all the laughs coming from Gyllenhaal. You got Mikey reacts, but Chloe Fineman is just like playing like to the side the whole sketch. What can we identify about what she brings to SNL that makes her that role rather than an Ego or a Heidi or one of the newbies?
Well, I think, and that's why it's such an important part of the show, that she is the ultimate utility player. Ego and Heidi are getting the meatier roles, but Chloe is filling in those gaps. I think she most reminds me of, in recent years, Melissa, where fantastic impressionist, but can they break out of that? And as John alludes to, like, we did see that this year. We got to see her do more than just her fantastic impressions. She was the girlfriend. She was the go-to, and she identifies with, I think more than most, maybe Longfellow would be up there as well, with the younger viewers of SNL. She's very fashionable. She's very well known on Instagram. She was at the Met Gala. So she's part of the zeitgeist for the 25 and under crowd that's watching SNL. And I think that helps her on the show. It was a much quieter season for her than last year, but it's a much more impressive season, if that makes sense. So I'm encouraged by what we saw this year as well. And I think that this could be a turning point for her. This could be like a Mikey Day renaissance for her going into her 6th season.
Is there any validity to the service that Chloe Fineman brings? There's a little Phil Hartman-esque. Bill, not in terms of talent, not style, but like the usage. Like Chloe Fineman is just punching the clock at 8H and just she's everywhere. So again, not the comedy, but who can I ask besides Bill Kenney? I mean, let's go.
Well, thank you. I don't know. I get where you're going, and that is a decent comparison. It's hard because Phil had so many impressions, and he was getting them on every week with the politics of the time. She doesn't really have that, and she, maybe she will next year as we dive more into, a presidential season. But yeah, as far as somebody like who fills those roles, nobody knew what Phil's face really looked like. That was one of the jokes in his last couple of seasons because he was always either in the full makeup or in the background. And Chloe does fill those roles for sure.
Here, let me throw another comparison out there, Bill. What about Chris Parnell? What if she's like a modern day Parnell?
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, that could definitely work.
Because the reason like why I think Phil is the GOAT is like he has all that utility stuff, but he also has the ability to just like run the entire show. Like the show, he could do it, but he doesn't always do it. And I think that's what made Phil so great. So I don't think Chloe's like anywhere near that level, but I think Parnell has a lot of those qualities and on a lighter level sort of eventually found his niche on the show. And I wonder if Chloe is at that level as well, where we're never going to look at this era of the show as Chloe Fineman's era, but maybe as she heads into the second half of her career, whenever it's over, we look back at it being like, oh yeah, like Chloe Fineman was pretty solid for a few years.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the Parnell one's good, especially because it does kind of capture what I was going for with Phil with the voice work that plug her in everywhere. And so 12 appearances this year, over 2 minutes. If we take out the 3 update appearances, it'll be 9. So I want to just show or name these sketches because they're more would lean themselves to Chloe Fineman live led pieces. So we're going to eliminate update, the voice work, all that stuff we're talking about, utility roles. Some of them will be, but they're What's in the Kiln, 5 minutes, 8 seconds. Cast Away with Momoa, 3:36. Crown Your Short King from Elordi, 3:16. So 3 sketches right there. I wouldn't say are great. I don't know, Jim.
But it's mostly first half material, though. I know Elordi's like technically second half, but really only the 9th episode of the season.
The bike trail one, and then Hooters waitress Erin Brockovich at the end of the night there. The engagement from Gosling's, the convent meeting from Bad Bunny, and Detectives with Sydney Sweeney. So those are all sketches, not pre-tapes, that had a lot of Chloe Fineman. So John, would you say that list right there would be weak, moderate, or strong sketch material that Chloe got into?
Totally a tale of 2 seasons for me. So I guess I'd have to go, like, if I'm looking at the season as a whole, I have to go moderate, just based on that. But like I said, I think if I'm just evaluating like the back 10 episodes, very, very good cast member. First 10, a lot similar to me to some of the tropes I didn't love from her previously. But I'm excited to see if Chloe will continue to just, find her place. I mean, there's a lot of cast members, if you go into interviews with them, that have said it took them 4 years to finally feel comfortable on the show. So maybe she actually is finally feeling comfortable and confident in her place at Saturday Night Live.
And I will shout out the Hallmark Horror with Bargatze, which was a completely Chloe-led piece that she had to just like really act well and not necessarily deliver the laughs. So that wasn't a sketch, but I want to shout that one out. Number 7 in the power rankings.
Yeah, let's do that. This one, I'm very excited to talk about this next cast member. Mike, introduce them for us.
So this is somebody who came in as a solo rookie. So they, came in season 44, right? So We had Bowen, Chloe, Gillis coming in at 45. We didn't get Gillis. We got Bowen and Chloe, and they've had very different careers. But before them was Nwodim, who's now at a 70.8, is 7th in the cast, and somebody who I feel like they would have been top 5. Maybe it's just Heidi's time to shine as the new premier woman of the cast. But I mean, Ego's not that far behind as far as like all the raw data, but had a lot of great moments. I can't wait to talk about them. But let's do the stats. 73 appearances for Nwodim this year. That's 6th in the cast. An hour, 29 and 46 seconds. That's 7th in the cast. So the 70.8 is her overall average for all the stats in the power ranking. Screen time did go down, though, on average. So down about 18%. So average screen time per episode. Appearances as well went down about 5% per episode. Live from New York, only got 1, and that's in the Maya Rudolph one. So, almost everybody got that. But update appearances were pretty strong. So Bad Bunny, Kate McKinnon, and Sydney Sweeney, Ego was at the desk. And looking at, top episodes and, worst episodes, had 9 minutes 36 one week, had a 6:33, a 6:20, a 6:6, a 6:8. So we got some over 5 minutes, over 6 minutes episodes from Ego, and only one under 2 minutes. So Nwodim, I looked at last year, was like always in 10-1s or leading 10-1 stats, which I thought was a weird trend for someone entering their prime on the show. But John, I mean, you're excited about it. I can't wait to go to you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about Ego because I think she had a little bit of a weird year at Saturday Night Live. If I had to think about highlights overall, despite how different people feel about the sketch, like you either love it or you hate it, bringing back Lisa from Temecula is interesting. It's going to be the thing she's always going to be known for at the show. So get to see it again at the show. Had some interesting update pieces. I think the rich auntie with no kids is my personal highlight that I saw from her this year. But not that many vehicles for Ego in live sketches throughout the season. Like very surprising. She had she had a thing with Marcello. She had a thing with Bowen this year. But maybe the one that I think is the standout is the Jamaican church sketch from the Shane Gillis episode. But
I love that one.
It's a great one, but I'm pulling at straws a little bit, right? Like I'm trying to find things from Ego this year. And, for somebody of Ego's talent, I would think she would be all over this show. So I think I've said it to you on By the Numbers before when I'm on like once a month with you, which is like, when you look at the top 3 who are dominating the stats of the show, Ego should be in that category with them. For whatever reason, she's not. And she is the one out of all the stats we look at, I'm still the most puzzled by. I don't get it. She hits a lot on the show. Like when she does, like I said, her hit rate's very high. People look at her sketches and generally like them. She seems to understand the show well. The show seems to want to use her, but they just don't. So it's confusing to me.
Yeah, I'm looking at the most screen time she had in sketches. We're seeing the Republican debate cold open, of course. People logged a lot of stats there. Trivia Quest, which was with Edebiri, I thought was strong. The Thanksgiving week airport parade with Momoa, that's 3 minutes, 36 seconds. Lisa from Temecula, also 3 minutes, 3. Couple goals with Rami, 2 minutes, 46. Playing off the host there. I feel like I don't remember her in the 10-1 with Kristen Wiig, but she logged 229 there. Big bench from the Sweeney episode, 229. So I'm seeing some forgettable pieces there, but she did log 38 1 minute or more appearances. So again, Ego is doing a lot of heavy lifting, especially in the live sketches. But I totally agree with John here, though, because I would think that at the end of the year on By the Numbers, we'd have a lot more to talk about with Nwodim, and we just don't. So, Bill, Kenney, your thoughts?
Yeah, let's make it a clean sweep. I had the same thought. And last year with season 48, there was a lot to talk about with her performances. The exorcism sketch comes to mind and the funeral. So there were these great pieces where she was just overwhelming the screen. And yeah, I don't have a lot to point to either. I think the IO episode, there was a lot of good stuff. The trivia quest, as you mentioned, Mike, was fantastic. She was the best part of the customer service call in the Gyllenhaal episode. Um, but yeah, it's if you had to ask me where she would be in the power rankings at the end of the season, I wouldn't have had her this high just because so many of those pieces were background pieces, where it's almost like a step backwards, even though she's technically moved up, right? She was 8 last year. So uh, it's not a detriment to her at all. I think she's still fantastic. She's still one of my favorite performers on the show. But yeah, no slam dunks that you can really point to.
Also, I'll say, I think this is not a measurable stat, and funny is subjective, I always say. But I think if you polled like a lot of SNL fans and asked them which cast member makes you laugh the most on the show, I think Ego would be top of that list. Like, I know she does for me. Like, oftentimes I'll walk into a hot take show after watching an episode with like a really good laugh that Ego gave me from that episode. But it is a laugh that happens like pretty quickly that the stats are not going to tell the story of. So, for me, it's like she's not really a stat player. She's just like, I don't think the stats are like based on her career, Mike, I don't think the stats do her favors.
It's kind of up and down. I mean, I mentioned this stat to introduce Ego, so I'll follow up with it. She was second in the cast with percentage of her own screen time. So we can see the pie chart, but I'm breaking it out a little bit more. It's talking about live sketches in the 10 to 1s. So I just feel like Ego's so dynamic and can do a lot and move a lot, like that Jamaican church sketch, which was like all her. I mean, we had Heidi, Shane, Dismukes, and Molly like being the reactors, but it was all Ego, Kenan on the side a little bit. But Ego Nwodim, 13.2% of her own screen time is in 10 to 1s. That's a pretty high number. It's only behind Devon, but that's a percentage. So if we look at most 10 to 1 screen time, it's Kenan at number 1. It's Ego at number 2. So Ego did log 11 minutes and 53 seconds of 10 to 1s. 7 out of the 20 sketches that were 10 to 1 this year, Ego was in. So that trend did continue. And it's not a bad trend, but it's certainly not a good one because we saw that, again, the Jamaican church sketch first in the Gillis episode with the, DraftKings pre-tape. So maybe that the Ego showcases just don't pop up enough, but when they do, they're great. So good hit rate
I think she
for
was
when she
taking
leads.
more risks last year. If I'll say that.
She took more risks, like as a performer.
Yeah, I think she did. I think in season 48, she took more risks as a performer. And I don't mean this insultingly, but I think she played it more safe in season 49. She did the things that she knew would work for her on the show, but there was no stretching of any way that I really saw where I'm like, oh, that's different. With the exception of the rich auntie with no kids, which I think was like a classic piece of hers that I would put on her best of whenever her time is done at the show.
And doesn't really do cold opens. Didn't see her. She didn't say live from New York for like a couple years until Mother's Day. So I was looking at that, like the range of how long between live from New York's, and hers was like that. I think maybe the highest until she had the Mother's Day one. So cold open appearances for Ego. We got 8 for 8 minutes. So 7% of cold open screen time includes Ego. That's one of the lower ones in the cast, so that maybe hurts your stats, John. I mean,
she did she did play Vivek. I can't pronounce the last name, but
Ramaswamy, yeah, and she was great as that. She made that figure like so much funnier than for someone we don't know a lot about. So I thought that was great. So I think her screen time there is just like her frozen with her mouth open behind JAJ's Trump as Vivek Ramaswamy. So,
but what's funny is that if you take that out, like let's say you remove that stat from the stat line, does she then drop below, Chloe Fineman and Dismukes, because that's just her basically in the background playing a character that they felt like, fit her look. So it's not really, something that she brought to the show. It's something that the show brought to her. And I wondered if that's a case where it's like, is her season actually worse than we thought?
I mean, looking at other cold opens that she was in, let's do it real quick.
I mean, she must have been in 3 minutes at least of that cold open, right?
Yeah, so we had the Christmas Awards cold open was in for 7 seconds. You know, we had the George Santos cold open, the Big Bowen piece was in for a tiny bit as a reporter. So going up to the top, it's like, yeah, that was a Republican cold open debate. And Inside Politics cold open, Ego had
How many minutes was she
13.
in that Timothee Chalamet cold open?
Which was what, the Santos one?
No, that I thought that was the Republican debate one where she was playing Vivek.
Oh yeah, so season 49, episode 4, Ego had 4 minutes and 14 seconds. Like instead of her just in the background frozen.
All right, and that's cold open time, so that's like given a little bit of a bonus that it's at the top of the show. So you pulled that out of the power ranking, in my opinion. It's like skewing this a little bit higher than maybe it really is for Ego.
Yeah, it's like it helped the people in the Last Supper last year, like Marcello and Dismukes Frozen too. That was some prime time screen time of them on your TV, but not doing anything. So great point.
Yeah.
Number 6.
All right, into the top 6. We're getting there, guys. I think anybody who called the over on the time from last year's podcast is going to make some money tonight. But this will be a fun cast member to talk about here at number 6, Mike.
Do you happen to know what our runtime was last year?
We went. I said it today to Ellis and Matt, but I think it was 3:02 or 3:03. So I think we'll see. We'll still
see.
have 6 more cast members.
We still have Jost in there, so that'll be quick.
Yeah, I think the record is 4:47. We're not going to get there tonight, but we'll see. Here we go. Number 6.
Number 6, James Austin Johnson. So much to say about this guy. 4 appearances per episode, never missed a show, and we finally got to see him break out even more. So I think, John, you were high on that pre-tape with Kate McKinnon, right? That we got, he's doing a sketch. You know, even though it's a pre-tape, we see him do a character, but we saw him do a little bit of his impressions on Update, you know, Bob Dylan's cell phone on vibrate and Trump and at, you know, ordering a Negroni at the after party. All, you know, we saw little touches, but now JJ is like the premier utility guy. You know, Blood's been saying all year, he's the glue of SNL. I'd have to agree. He is everywhere. So if we take out the Trump stats, you know, I can maybe run that quick while one of you give a take, but I don't think he really needs it that much as far as his output. It just racks up stats in the cold open. We see all these purple bars on the screen here. Those are all cold open. So we're seeing it episode 2, episode 4, 5, a little bit in 6. Going down, we see 4 in a row. We saw a huge one. The Rama Yusuf episode selling the Bibles that went on for a really long time. So, and then the finale, we saw a ton of Trump there. So here are his stats: 80 appearances. That's 5th in the cast. An hour, 35 minutes, 21 seconds of screen time. That's 6th in the cast. Final power ranking was a 74.5. His screen time on average did drop down 5.6, but appearances went up 16.1%. So we saw some more of JJ. He was used in those voice roles, all that stuff. We didn't see him really a lot on Update. I do like when he pops up there. It took him a while, especially because we saw Sarah and Aristotle early on in 47. We didn't see JJ that year. So I do like seeing him pop up there. That was in Remember Lizards. Remember Lizards, Bill?
I'd rather not. Yes.
Oh no, we don't have a lizard head here.
I'm not a lizard head, no.
Oh, okay, that's a shame.
Boo.
Well, at least he remembered them. Okay, so John, I feel like I just have so many stats on JJ that I want you to at least point me in a direction to find some.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, look, I think you can't talk about a season without talking about Trump and his role as Trump and potentially what he will do into the election cycle. I'm at the point where I feel, honestly, that Saturday Night Live would, it's dangerous to say, but Saturday Night Live would not be doing as many Trump sketches if JJ wasn't on the cast. So, like, JJ is the reason why they are doing Trump sketches, not the other way around. And you would think conventionally that the show would be like, okay, let's cover Trump because he's going through all this stuff and we'd want the rants and stuff. But JJ is so good at it and has the ability to just stand in front of the camera and talk and rant at it, that it's like a skill that they can't wait to show off. It's like buying a new car and there it's like, okay, I want to just park it outside and show it to all my friends. That is what Saturday Night Live does with JJ, because whenever they need it, they know they can throw to him and he will just go at it. And like, it is so impressive, the things that he can do. And I've heard it a million times. I know we're all tired of it. I know we're all tired of the different variations of and conversations around him and all that stuff. But that's not JJ's fault. Like he happens to be an incredible impressionist. My hope is that whatever happens through the election cycle, we're going to continue to see him, use those skills more and see him do additional impressions. But I think that's a major factor here. You can't talk about a season without it. I do think that his relationship with Andrew Dismukes, who is clearly excelling on the show, like he latched onto the right person as a friend at the show between Remember Lizards, Lake Beach, doing the jingle pitch again, like having that guy there to do other stuff with is great. And, Bill, the last sketch of the season, goes to JAJ in a character piece. Like, how cool is that? So I don't know if I'm fully on board to say he's the glue of the show, but I think he has, some of the highest skill set we've seen on the show in the millennium, maybe. Like, he's up there with some of the greats in terms of like his potential skills. And I don't know that they're fully using him as a glue, but they're certainly relying on him as being a star of the show.
Yeah, that is a smoking hot take, John, to say that they are using Trump because of JAJ. That's very, very interesting take. I don't know that that's true. I actually think the exact opposite. I think they've actually pumped the brakes because of all the backlash that they got with the Baldwin Trump. They could put Trump in every week because of this moron's activities. Like just the court case itself. Think about the OJ case and how much they trotted that out in 95 and 94. So I think they've shown a little bit of restraint, even though as you said, people are tired of it in certain ways. It's exhaustion after 8 years of this nonstop. But I think JAJ's take on it is so fresh and so good that I don't mind it. Where, as you know, I can't stand rewatching the stuff from when he was president, because I think the Baldwin stuff just petered out and became very bogged down in the minutia of it all. So I enjoy JJ. And Mike, you asked about Phil Hartman earlier. This is the Phil Hartman right now. We saw that turn. We saw that pivot this year with so many more father roles, so many more husband roles. The Kristen Wiig episode especially sticks out, where he was playing off of her so much. So I really enjoy what we've seen from him. How much more are we going to get next year? Is it just going to be Trump because he's going to have to play him every week, at least through November or December? Is that going to take away from the other stuff that he does on the show? Hopefully not.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to jump in just to say this quickly to Bill, which is that I get it. I get the Hartman comparison. I do think that the difference between Phil Hartman and James Austin Johnson is that everybody, no matter what style of your sketch, wanted Phil Hartman in their sketch because he elevated and made bad sketches good and good sketches great. I think JJ is being used as different roles this year as the father. Go-karting sketch is a great example from the Wiig episode of where they're using him more in roles where he can certainly get to that point. It is Phil Hartman-esque, but I still haven't seen every style of sketch in the show being used by him. But I can squint and I could see it. I could see what they're doing here with him, that, hosting the caveman sketch from the Rudolph episode, hosting the ABBA Christmas sketch. Like, I could start to see these things starting. The wheels are turning here, that he could be this one day. I just think we're a little early.
Oh, most definitely. And you can't say that after 3 years that he is Phil Hartman. I'm not, most definitely not saying that. And Phil, in his first couple of seasons, he had the Reagan impression. It wasn't really until Clinton in his fifth season-ish, somewhere around there, fifth or sixth season, where it really took off and you saw, okay, this is one of the all-time greats. He had been a great glue before. He had done some great impressions before. So, yeah, there is a long road to travel before you can put JAJ in that conversation. But as you say, I think he's on the right road to it.
And I wonder if the piece here, the domino that will just elevate him into the stratosphere of like all-time greats is Mikey Day potentially leaving the show, like almost like, you know, like John Lovitz leaves the show, Phil Hartman continues to rise, like slowly, you know, more people start to leave the show that are of his era. Jan leaves, Dana leaves, and all of a sudden, like Phil is, you know, there with Kevin, and it's just taking over. So I do wonder if that will eventually happen. Like you said, Ole in his third year. But one more take before I'm going to let Mike jump in, because I know he has so much data on JJ that I want to hear about, which is that I think, you know, we did the top 50 cast members of all time list in the fall. JJ, too early in his career to get on it. I think if we were doing it again this summer, he cracks the top 50.
I agree with that. I wanted to just jump in the middle of this little debate that happened here about the Trump usage on SNL, because I don't know. I feel like if I talk to maybe older people who watch SNL, who maybe enjoy the politics more than the really like niche fans who get into like the nitty gritty like we do, that might be tired of the politics, either because of the demographic or just because they want more variety. You're all right in your own way. But I kind of agree with both of you in a different way, because Bill said they could be putting him on every week. I don't know if that's true in the way that they've done it. So I kind of agree with Bill that they could be, but they're not. They might be showing some restraint. I also agree with John by saying that they're so proud of that. And I think it might be a little bit of a makeup from Baldwin, because they were doing like the Baldwin in the Oval Office with the, you know, carousel of evil Republicans coming in, you know, Mikey Day as like the Grim Reaper, and all these celebrity stunt casting. What I think is in the middle is that they aren't really leaning in a ton to what Trump's actually doing in the news. They're leaning into JAJ's impression. So I guess I'm falling in the middle, because they haven't done like Trump in court. They've done him outside to camera, you know, outside the barricades. They've done him as the Bible salesman. They've done these things where it's just a vehicle for JJ to just go off as Trump. So I think they just like that. And it's a strong way to open a show that people were interested in seeing, like, what's he going to say this week? Rather, it's just so different than Baldwin's Trump of just rehashing the news that it might be a mea culpa. But again, like John said, it's just like they're so proud of that impression. It's the best Trump impression that's ever occurred, in my opinion. I think Shane Gillis might be too, and we got to see them together this season, which was great. But John, my JJ comment was just going to be on the non-cold open appearances. You got to mention a couple of them, so I'm glad you did. But that's a couple goals in Rami Youssef as the game show host, like, was so good. That's a sketch that could have like really flopped. I think JJ reading the cue cards that Rami was holding up was like brilliant, and the pacing and the voice was great. The go-karts with Wiig, you mentioned. Second jingle pitch, subway platform with Devon Walker on the Bad Bunny show. He really had to play it completely straight, dramatic role. And bank robbery with Josh Brolin as one of the bank robbers, a role I feel like we didn't expect to be JJ, and was Gifts from Mom, the Kate with the sweater, and was also in that Chicken Fongers sketch. So these are all his 2-minute roles or more that weren't cold opens. He also did play like Ernie Johnson in the NBA one. So he's done other things there too. But also love Lake Beach. That's where the bats are all time.
Yeah, I think he had a fantastic season on the show. I'm very excited to talk to him about it, because we're scheduled to interview him next week. So in this time slot next week, if all goes well, we will have an SNN interview with James Austin Johnson. So looking forward to that.
JAJ, SNN, 3-letter initialisms, can't be beat.
So
yeah, Bill, let's go.
Didn't mean to interrupt your haiku. That was great. So is your first question, John, going to be, do you like us calling you JAJ?
Is it Jadge?
We started that.
I know.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I'm really excited for that. Yeah, they're doing their traditional Emmy, pre-Emmy nomination press stuff, and we're on the list to talk to James Austin Johnson. So looking forward to sharing that all with you guys. Of course, anything could happen, but I'm fingers crossed. All is good. Chicken fingers crossed.
Love it. All right, number 5. Who would have thunk doing SNL stats as long as I have? And Kenan Thompson is alive and well and in the cast, and he is now 5th. So I got to do some comparisons to last year. But first, I'll tell the good people where he was this year. 85 appearances, no slouch from KT right here. So second, tie with Mikey Day, only behind Heidi in appearances. So Kenan Thompson definitely, very much in the mix. But power ranking 5th. Why is that? Let's go to the tail of the tape here. Screen time was just not up to what Kenan's used to getting. So we're seeing Kenan in a smaller capacity, even though we're seeing him in a pretty good frequency. But let's go to the screen time difference. So 26.8% drop in screen time average from season 48. I feel like it was almost like laughable, John, when we've got to Kenan at the last slide and we're tired. It's been a 3-hour show. And we're like, well, yeah, it's, Kenan's the GOAT. He's just never going to leave. We love him. It's Kenan. All right. Good night, everybody. This has been the SNN. But this one is so much more fascinating because we haven't seen this type of drop from a vet in the cast. We've seen them ramp up and leave. We've seen people fade out and get fired or walk away. But for Kenan to still be there, be maybe the most famous cast member in the show, I would say, for sure. Now that Pete's gone and Kate's gone, but almost 27% decrease in screen time for Kenan Thompson. Immediate reaction, John Schneider.
Look, I mean, Kenan's Kenan, right? Like, you can use him in any way you want. I will say, first half of the season definitely was a factor with the other things he was promoting outside of the show. Good Burger 2, his book, all of that stuff. I'm sure that took away a little bit. And I was expecting him to return to form in second half. He didn't do that. So I don't want to go as far as to say like he collected his paycheck every week this season, but I think like, he definitely did not drive anything this season. Like if I go back and I look through the sketches, he had a few pieces on Weekend Update. 2 of them were, with Marcello. So if then you have to go back to Deion Sanders, like all the way at the beginning of the season. What was his sketch this season? A reprise of an old sketch, the tree lighting gig that they brought back.
Oh, my favorite one.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was it. That was the only Kenan Thompson piece here. It was Molly Kearney-esque how many leading pieces Kenan had this season. It was just nothing. And he was, a great utility player, truly, with appearing in so many things. And I think he does elevate sketches still. But this is like an all-time great professional athlete who I believe is now sort of past his prime, doesn't have it to come on the show and put up number 1 stats anymore. We saw an amazing late career arc from him that I think was really impressive. Like whenever whoever's on the SNL Hall of Fame podcast one day talking about Kenan Thompson's resume, I think you're going to go back and you're going to look at, 46, 47, 48, or at least 47, 48 and be like, wow, like Kenan that far into his career did so many impressive things. But I think we're tailing off here. I think this is the end.
So I have to say this stat, I think I just discovered it for the first time myself, so I want to share it with the people. 7 minutes, 45 second screen time average in season 44. That's 7 minutes, 45 seconds. That is the largest average recorded since season 44. So Kenan Thompson was really driving the show, and maybe an era that we don't remember too fondly. Maybe he had to do a little bit extra legwork. Season 45, 5 minutes 8. The COVID year, season 46, 4:45. There was a dip. So season 47 and 48, which John's mentioning, he went up over a whole minute to 5 minutes 46, season 47, and then crushed it last year, 651. So it doesn't, eclipse that one I said earlier, 745, but 651 was the best average in the cast. Just a little bit ahead of Bowen. Everyone else is way lower than that. And then, so 6 minutes, 51 seconds average last year, dropped 1 minute and 50 seconds less Kenan Thompson this season. Once again, 6 minutes 51 last year, 5 minutes 1 second per episode this year, down 27%. Bill Kenney, we've never seen somebody been on the show this long. So is this a deliberate move by Kenan stepping aside, by the show to promote new talent, or is it somebody who has nothing left to prove? And, we just go to Kenan, we knock on his door, his dressing room when we need him. He shows up, and it's great because we're not seeing him, like John said, like vehicle sketches. We saw that home movies one, him going backwards, and so many unique moments. This year, we just didn't get those. So, Bill, what do you make of all this? It's such a unique perspective, 21 years in the show.
Mike, I'll be interested as you go back in time and do the statistics on previous seasons where Daryl Hammond's last couple seasons would fall in this. This feels like that kind of precipitous, just from the eyeball test, that kind of precipitous drop. Now, he was miserable on the show it's well known that he was not happy being on the show those last couple years. He was pretty much phoning it in. I don't think Kenan's there, but I think that is certainly an element. It feels like his own doing. I can't imagine SNL would be like, as John said, one of the biggest stars in the show, like, okay, we don't want you in as much. I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of it was all that stuff he was doing in the fall to promote other things. He was like, you know what? I don't have to be doing as much on the show. I'm still going to be in it. I'm still going to help out where I can. Call me if you need me. But yeah, not driving the pieces. There's nothing to point to, as you both say. Washington's Dream in the Bergazzi episode, which was very early on, of course, and but he wasn't the star of that either.
That's a Mikey piece.
Right. But as far as like screen time in that, and then the chef show in the same episode, Columbia Dad. So there were moments, but again, there is nothing you can really go to and say that's going on the reel. That's going to be something we remember from Kenan, and it's a shame.
Yeah, Eric shouting out the OBGYN sketch from Dua Lipa, which was a great Kenan piece that I can't see anyone else in the cast doing, so I will mention that. I have to say, because we mentioned it at the very end of last episode, the drop-off. So the power ranking, taking in every stat, he finished with 106 last year. So he did win the power ranking crown season 44, 47, 48. Now he's 5th. But just the drop-off, screen time is great because we can talk about the individual times we saw him. But just to take in consideration his role quality, which is hard to talk about example by example, he went from a 106 to about an 81. So that's a huge drop off stat wise. Probably the biggest drop we'll see of any stat tonight on the show.
Right. But I also want to say, I think that like when you give examples of OBGYN that Eric pointed out, and Ellis points out the Momoa 10-1, the taxi driver sketch, like to me, those are Kenan pieces, but they're written through another voice. So like Michael Che wrote the OBGYN sketch. He is like sort of using Kenan as his driver of that. It's not like a what up with that situation or a Scared Straight or the tree lighting gig, for example, that are like, hey, this is like Kenan, like star of the show type of thing. And he totally gets the A role there. But I would say like what I'm talking about here is like Kenan being involved in from conception to like execution. And I don't think he's doing that. Like it almost, to me, he's like LeBron James in the regular season now, who like doesn't play defense and like will play like 65 out of 82 games. Like he's still showing up, but like he's still, to me, a top 10 cast member in the history of the show. But this is the end as far as I see it, like the beginning of the end.
So, John, those last couple seasons, off the top of your head, was he writing most of those A-list pieces that he was in?
Well, I think the only things that I would say are for sure are the ones that he would do on Weekend Update, which a lot of times he'd write with Brian Tucker. But taking a look, like I'm looking at the season 48 writing credits right now, just to see if I see Kenan's name pop up anywhere besides Weekend Update. And I don't really. I think the last time, though he was used a lot more last year, but I think the last time that I could say is a discernible Kenan Thompson piece that he wrote and executed on the show, maybe that like home movies sketch from a couple seasons ago where he was doing like the fast forward and the rewind and stuff like that. That was like, through him written and executed. So anyways, it's just interesting to see like what they'll do with somebody who's in his 21st season. Now, huge question here as we're wrapping up our Kenan segment of this show is we are headed towards the 50th season of the show. Kenan Thompson is a cast member that was on for 44% of the show's history and obviously is well connected to every modern cast member in the history of the show and anyone who's hosted since 2003. So to me, I think he has a great chance to have, upward trajectory stats next year. Whereas if 50 was a normal season, I think it would continue downwards. So I just want to point that out here that, it may not be linear, the decline that we may assume to see from him. Also wouldn't be surprised if he does decide to move on after 50, given the nature of the season, or even if he hosts as a cast member at the end of next season to say goodbye. Wouldn't be stunned by that either. Mark that down.
Love it. Not going to happen. But again, love it, John. Love the prediction. Hasn't happened since Eddie Murphy. I doubt it will happen again. But if someone's going to do it, why not Kenan? This is a point to John's point about him in season 50, a lot of familiar faces. So I wanted to point out where Kenan scored very high, and that was with SNL alum. So exception of Kate McKinnon's Christmas show, Kenan killed it in the Pete episode. So right away, he was leading the power rankings after 1 week, 141 with Pete Davidson. So he was crushing it right away. We probably all thought like Kenan's going to keep that arc he had from 48. He did not do well with like younger first-time hosts. So I think that's showing his age a little bit, like pairing him up with a Bad Bunny. He did not have a good episode. A Lordy, he had a terrible episode. Very middling with like Sydney Sweeney. He had a 41. So like these younger hosts, he didn't score well, but he, other than Dua Lipa, he did have a good night. OBGYN and the cold open carried it. I don't think he really needed to play off Dua Lipa for those two pieces because cold open had no Dua Lipa. The OBGYN, he was really working off, Ego as the pregnant woman and Mikey as the expectant dad, and then Punkie coming in later. So didn't really need the younger host next to him, but he did great with Maya and Kristen Wiig. So just to wrap up your point, John, like if we're seeing a lot of alumni hosts who like, oh, I can't wait to like dap up Kenan when I walk in the door and like work with him, that'll be great for him.
I remember Bobby saying when we interviewed him, he's like, I showed up and like the only person I knew was Kenan. So it's like, that's what some people might be like next year.
All right. So we're getting to number 4.
Final 4 here. A lot of things to say about this next guy, right, Mike? So here, who is at number 4?
Well, the biggest thing to say is that this guy won the screen time title this year. So there is a triple crown in SNL stats to, if you win the power ranking, that means you kind of won the season. But there's 2 stats that we hold like very near and dear to us here. That didn't mean to rhyme, but is screen time and appearances. So this year, Colin Jost, the bottom appearances, he won the screen time title. Over 2 hours, only person in the cast to get more than 2 hours of screen time. It does make sense. Updates were long. He got way more guests than Che. We had one episode where he had 3 guests and Che had none. So Bill, to answer your question, that's probably why Colin Jost gets more screen time than Che. He gets more guests on average. He's about like a third more screen time overall. So that was 2 hours, 5 minutes, 54 seconds. So I can look up some context about who's like logged a 2 hour season. some seasons shorter than others, but this one was average at 20. So, he only averaged 1.1 appearances. If you can remember where he appeared otherwise, chat, jump in, because he did appear twice outside of Update, which was fun, much like Che in that episode 1 Pete pre-tape, which I loved. But his numbers, they're just shockingly consistent, or I should say unshockingly consistent as an Update anchor, but they really heated up at the end. Dua Lipa, Maya Rudolph, and Jake Gyllenhaal, he really led Weekend Update. So quick slide here, John. What can you say about Kojo?
I actually think he had a really good season this year. I think he was
Agreed.
very solid in all his updates, and he was great interacting with his guests this year. I think that was something that it was a little bit of improvement over the last couple of years, where he seemed to show the energy with the guests. I really liked him this year. I also still think his writing is really strong. Wrote a lot of the cold opens. He wrote that Scarlett Johansson cold open. That was great. So for me, I'm not much to complain about with Colin. I'm really happy to have him on the show. I want to say, before we get Bill's thoughts on Colin Jost, that this is a fun little trivia stat. So you mentioned Colin Jost's SPE this year of a 1.1. So his career sketch per episode average is 1.14. Naturally, he's most of the time on Weekend Update. Michael Che's is 1.13. He's appeared less in sketches than Colin Jost, who at the time, I think in the last election cycle, did some, primary political impressions. So that's why his might be a little bit elevated. There's only 2 cast members in the history of the show that have a lower career SPE than Colin Jost and Michael Che. I would love to know, Bill, if you could think of who these people are.
Career?
Career. It's a little bit of a cheat, but I'm curious if you could think of who these people are.
I have some guesses when Bill's done.
All right.
Off the top of my head, Brian Doyle Murray.
Okay. Brian Doyle Murray is not the answer there, because Brian Doyle Murray he's higher up. In season 7,
he was a featured player in 5. So okay.
Yeah. So when he was a featured player and when he did some stuff in 7s, he actually has a career SPE as a cast member of 2.48. So he's pretty high up.
Wow.
Yeah. Mike, you want to guess?
Well, I want to say Emily Prager 0.0.
Yeah.
1 episode, 0 appearances. So we got to go with that one. And then I want to say Fred Wolf.
Okay. That Fred Wolf is a pretty good guess here, but it is not Fred Wolf. Where's Fred Wolf here? Fred Wolf is at a 1.67, so a little bit higher up.
So is it Metcalf Prager? Or?
It's Metcalf. It's Metcalf
okay,
Prager.
All right.
Yeah, Lori Metcalf, a career SPE of what? It's a good stat, Bill. Career SPE of 1, appeared in 1 sketch in the 1 episode of Lori Metcalf's career, and 0 sketches for Emily Prager, the only 2 people with lower SPEs.
This is the Moonlight Graham of SNL stats. What? Come on, man.
Hey,
well played. I will give it to you.
Thank you.
The 3 of us
John,
on this panel
let me put you
also have a 0.0 SPE. So
so does Shane Gillis, actually.
We're down there. I loved saying that Shane Gillis had more screen time in his hosting than all the rookies he would have come in with, and more than Aristotle, Lauren Holt, all that. So we did get a decent dose of it. But Colin Jost, I mentioned the 5-minute episodes. If you're Colin Jost, you're getting 5 minutes on average an episode anyway. So he only had 4 episodes this season where he didn't hit 5 minutes. And the Dua Lipa update where he had the 3 guests, he had over 9 minutes of screen time. So it always it's a little boring when he's up there in the power rankings, but the stats don't lie. I can't cheat.
Bill, you wanted to put me on the spot about something.
I just wanted to know if you knew off the top of your head, for someone who put in a full season, who the lowest SPE was.
Oh, someone who put in a full season? I will say, so let's say an average 20 episode season from an actual cast member. Let's not call it a writer who was featured on there. I believe the answer is Aristotle Atari, who put in a 1.4.
Do you have Smiggles when he was a cast member?
Smigel in any episodes as a cast member was 1.17.
Okay.
But so that is, lower. But again, he was only credited as a featured player when he was appearing in an episode. So let's say he was doing, the Bears or anything like that. So it doesn't really exactly count here. But I think Aristotle has the lowest SPE of all time for somebody who is a legitimate cast member in a full season.
So
Interesting.
that means we have George Coe at a 4.0. Is that correct?
With George Coe, well, he was in 4 episodes of the show. You're saying that he was in 16 sketches?
Well, meaning that he was credited
Yes.
for only the
Oh, no,
first
sorry. He's only
episode.
credited. No, sorry. That's what Donahue was for. Yes. Yes. George Coe is at a 1. But again, when we do these stats like properly and we list it out, we usually do like a minimum of 30 episodes. In George Coe's case, his career SBE would be 4.0, but he only has 1 episode of data to count.
Right. It's like ERA in baseball, like minimum innings or, minimum passer rating.
I say the minimum line is the Chevy Chase line. I think you have to be on the show for 30 episodes to have a good resume of SBE to take a look at. And that's why when we post those graphics with them, we do it like minimum of 30 episodes.
Very good.
Love it. Let's go to number 3. Top 3. This was the 3-horse race John pointed out when he filled in for me, hosting with Sammy K. He was saying it's really just these 3 who's going to finish on top, and it came down to the wire in the final episode. But Bowen Yang really stayed at number 3 all year, so he has the bronze medal this year. 84.9 power ranking, super strong stats. Really was somebody that I look back and think on that when he had a good episode, it was really just like Bowen pieces. I feel like he didn't work a lot with other people, and I think John, you pointed that out on when you subbed in for me, that there was a lot of like Bowen and somebody else. It wasn't a lot of like team sketches. Maybe I'm thinking of like the Adam Driver We're Trying was like a group piece, but here are his stats: 71 appearances. That's 7th, tied with your boy Andy Dismukes. Screen time 1 hour 57 minutes 9 seconds. So he did finish behind Jost at number 2. Got very close to that 2-hour mark. His screen time did go down, surprising to me. I thought he was going to be number 1 power ranking this year, preseason. So it went down almost 13% from season 48. His appearances also went down about 9% from season 48. He had some good cold opens. He said live from New York solo twice. We love to track that stat. So one of which, John, I think is one of both our favorites. That George Santos cold open was just pristine, prime SNL, singing it and just opening the show. I feel like that show just had such a strong opening.
I love that piece. I think it was a really strong one from Bowen. I really felt that there were some good things from Bowen this year, and I like, it is interesting in comparison to the 2 people ahead of him. His style of performing is a little bit different. As you mentioned, the other 2 are a little bit more. I don't want to say Bowen's not a team player, but I just think that his sketches tend to revolve around him in a silo more than Heidi or Mikey. And, but again, he all over the show this year, like you said, 71 sketches. And I'm looking at like the list of sketches that are his pieces. I still think that the best pieces that we saw from Bowen Yang this year, including like Bowen Straight, Maison de Bang, I think he was pretty good in that one. The Cookie Crumble sketch, which some people seem to enjoy as well. ABBA Christmas, I like from him, the Santos stuff. I think the best sketches that we saw from Bowen Yang this year was when he wasn't trying to do sketches based on pop culture. I think the ones where he leans, even though like personally the Troy Sivan one I got more than the others, I think those are the ones where we started to like lose Bowen a little bit. And I think like the magic of Bowen is that he actually is probably like a writer's dream at Saturday Night Live, because if like you don't traditionally write for Bowen and you came to him and put him in your sketch, he's gonna like give you 110%. And I think he's a great player on the show. So for me, I think it's actually an underrated season for Bowen Yang, believe it or not.
I agree. I've been very high on Bowen the past couple of years. I think somebody who came in, as we know, breaking some mold by, being openly gay, by being an Asian cast member, and really could have slid down into like, I'm going to do that on the show, which he has, and he's done well, but has really broken away from that in like such a respectable way, and also maintaining his style. So he didn't sacrifice himself to appeal to everybody, but is all over the show in a good way. So he had the 2nd best episode stat-wise of the entire year, and that was in, believe it or not, season 49, episode 5, Momoa. He scored like a 185 of that episode. And looking at the segments of that show, I think pretty forgettable show, honestly, but he had that Biden Panda cold open about 3 minutes. He had the old timey movies, Thanksgiving Airport Parade 3:44, and then it was Santos on Update 3:22. So when he appeared, he was appearing for like 3 minutes on average. So that's why his score was so high. Mikey Day had the best stat episode of the year with Bad Bunny, believe it or not, but Bowen had the second best. So Bill, what did you like from Bowen this year? Do you think it was kind of consistent, or did you see more breakout from Bowen that he could be the star of the SNL cast? Because I think that was my prediction as far as who's going to be like the breakout performer, because he finally has room to do that.
Yeah, I think he's well on his way, even if he's fallen down a bit from last year. The ABBA sketch and some other sketches when alumni would come back, that just speaks to the respect that he gets, that he's being put in this. He was the only current cast member in the ABBA sketch, right? So that's really interesting, and it just speaks volumes to how much he is, endeared to the cast. Other than Garrett from Hinge, which we did not need back.
Yes, we did, Bill.
No, we did not.
I love Garrett.
Family Guy impressions aside, this was a no go for me. But this was great. Bowen Straight, probably a top 5 pre-tape of the season for me. Santos, I'm very impressed that they left it where they did. Now, that's not to say that they won't ever bring it back again, but the fact that he was getting kicked out of Congress and they did this epic cold open and just left it there, kind of the anti-Tim Scott of it all. But yeah, it was a really interesting season from him. He did fall back a bit, but I still think it was a phenomenal year for him.
I also want to shout out a couple other pieces from him that I think were really good that we don't talk about enough. Ethan, his sketch on Weekend Update, or a segment on Weekend Update where he came on and he was doing a version of the Oscars, the Ethans. That was something that we really enjoyed that night. And then his Moulin Rouge piece that he did with Ariana Grande. Again, this is something that's like, Brolin was like sort of in it, but not really. And it was just a moment for like Bowen with the musical guest. And it does remind me a little bit of the like ABBA Christmas, where it's like Bowen on his own could really carry a sketch. Like, I think if you had to think, if we wiped the slate clean of every cast member currently in season 49 and had to say like, who is going to come back and host, like who can you picture as a host of the show? I could picture Bowen Yang hosting Saturday Night Live more than any other cast member on the show. And I would know what I would be expecting, what type of sketches and all that stuff, because he has such a clear, distinct personality. And like, I've seen him take over shows before.
And I think that he'll get great work post SNL, John, which would be to your point about hosting, where Kenan would have a great legacy hosting opportunity. But I think Bowen could have a movie career more than a Kenan or a Mikey Day. But I mentioned 2 hours of screen time. So last season, even though it was a shortened season, Bowen did hit the 2 hour mark last year. He was 2 hours, 0 minutes, 53 seconds. So he only dipped, a little bit, but to an hour 57, but it was in more episodes, which is why his percentage went down as much as it did. But looking at his rise, Bowen did not have a great rookie year. So season 45, he was under 40 minutes of screen time. I know that we had, the at-homes at the end where someone like Chloe Fineman benefited from the at-homes, we agreed, but Bowen did not. So he didn't really get to move forward into 46 the way that Chloe Fineman did. But so he went from 39, 53 in season 45, went up to 55 minutes, almost 56 minutes in 46, up to an hour 15 and 47, up to 2 hours and 48, and now an hour 57 this year. So Bowen Yang is definitely I think going to stay top 3. John, you agree?
I think so. I mean, I do wonder if JAJ will be top 3 next year. I think he could slide in and be up there with Mikey and Heidi. I could see Bowen going down to 4, but I don't think Bowen's ever going to be under top 5 for the rest of his SNL career, unless he stays on a really long time.
Yeah, agreed. I'm looking at my entire screen time graph right now to see every episode I've covered and who has the most screen time, just to see where Bowen Yang ends up and with his 6 hours, 50 seconds and 50 minutes and 30 seconds, because I'm going back 44 to now, he did, have some appearances in pre-tapes as a writer. He was in that Unity song pre-tape. Then he really had a role with Sandra Oh when he played Kim Jong-un pre-cast. And so now looking at it, like, of course, Kenan's the top, Jost is the top, but Bowen Yang, we've seen the 9th most of anyone in SNL since season 44. So he's now, of course, past like 80 and Beck and Kyle, people like that. So, Kenan, Colin, Mikey, of course, at the top, but Bowen Yang, for having a slow start, has like really ramped up the screen time. So that's a great stat for him. Let's get to the top 2, John.
We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Number 2, silver medal this year, Mike. Who's gonna get it?
So this was, made my job so much fun this year, was seeing who would win the season on this podcast in the power ranking. So we went into episode 20, Jake Gyllenhaal, with like fraction points separating Mikey and Heidi. And, we did tip our hand a little bit and say like, oh, we're rooting for Heidi a little bit, just to maybe see a woman win since Kate McKinnon left. Because I mentioned earlier that Kenan won season 45, 7, and 8. So we had Kate win season 46. So we and 45. So Mikey Day did end up edging out a little bit, all because of that bike sketch with Jake Gyllenhaal, as I mentioned last week. But Heidi Gardner, with a phenomenal year, definitely solidifying herself as the lead woman in the cast, stat-wise, in every category, really. So, and the big gold medal, no one got the Triple Crown this year. Jost screen time, Mikey power ranking, Heidi appearances. So 88 appearances. I'm going to give John a chance to look at, how that compares maybe to other women or other leaders of seasons, but 88 to finish the year puts her first place. Screen time, 1 hour, 54 minutes, 34 seconds. That puts her 4th. Power ranking ended up being an 89.7. So that did go down from last year, but with this cast size and the way the season shook out, ended up putting her 2nd place. Her screen time went down, as I mentioned, 7%. Appearances went up 1.5%. She was the top co-star with most of the cast because she appeared the most. Her top co-star was Chloe Fineman. So we mentioned that Chloe had 82 appearances, not far behind. We can't talk about Heidi this season without weekend updates. So we had the fortune teller, we had the woman at work who pretends that she's busy, and then we had, I think my favorite one of all 3, woman who's pretending not to be mad but is mad, or whatever the title was. So we had those update appearances, and we saw her with some strong work in cold opens, giving her a great power ranking. Never really had a bad episode. Maybe, John, one of her lowest stat ones was when we were there to celebrate her 500th, which she was kind of in the show and then out of the show that night when she hit 500.
No, she wasn't there. She wasn't there for rehearsal for a lot of weeks. So I want to also say, like, not totally her fault, but
we did mention how lame it would have been if she hit 499 when we were there to celebrate 500. Would have been a little weird. Like, all right, we got the 499 cake. Well, we're just, rubbing the frosting.
Would have been
off.
A disaster. Yeah. Would have been like, hey, can we come back next week?
Yeah, we got to come back for Kristen Wiig. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Got to hit 500. But I mean, there's so much talk about with Heidi for down episodes. Yeah, it was Rami, it was Io, it was Bad Bunny. Other than that, Heidi was everywhere. I'll look at her cold opens, but in context of the appearances. But Bill, we talked about her when we were looking forward to seeing the final power rankings. What can we say about Heidi Gardner?
Well, I believe I shocked John on this here program last year when I said that if Heidi continues her trajectory, she will be in the Mount Rushmore of SNL females. And I think she took another step towards that for sure. Now, she, again, I put the disclaimer that she still needs at least another 3 to 4 really powerful seasons like this, but this is just a testament to her abilities. The Secretary sketch that she brought back twice and doing it with Kristen Wiig was just such a joy to see. all the Weekend Update piece. I mean, this was her return to Weekend Update prominence, right? She had kind of a down season, I believe, in 48 with Weekend Update. So seeing her back at that. And of course, you have to talk about the most talked about sketch of the year in Beavis and Butthead. For someone like her to break, we talked about it so much that week, was Phil Hartman-esque. Again, like, just she's not the kind of person to break. She went on the Today Show and talked about how she's not. So it endeared her to a whole other segment of fans, people who might not have ever seen her, who didn't watch SNL anymore because they were watching this Beavis and Butthead sketch online. So a phenomenal season. I can't wait to see what she does in season 50. Very well earned. Wish she was number 1, but number 2 ain't too bad.
Yeah, a couple of sketches that we didn't bring up yet include the Secretary sketch, which opened the season and was brought back with Kristen Wiig, and also her bank robbery sketch with Josh Brolin. And I think those are two of the more important sketches of the season. The bank robbery sketch, the reason why is because I think it broke open silliness into the show the second half of the year, and it made everything more loose and more fun. And just, it was really the start of like when I really felt like, oh yeah, I am enjoying the season. And the Secretary sketch, to me, which was good in the premiere, was fantastic with Kristen Wiig. And to see her work with, someone on my Mount Rushmore and really kill it, it was absolutely fantastic next to her. It was, I always knew Heidi was good, but I saw how great she could be. I think as far as like historical comparisons, I always saw Heidi as a little bit of like a Nora Dunn, where she had moments on the show, but really never like got past a certain threshold until this season, where they all really used her as, we're using the word a lot, but used her as a utility player, used her for whatever they needed her to do on the show. And I believe that's the thing I always felt like was missing, and I've expressed this here, is, her connection to the audience. And I think through Beavis and Butthead, where she broke and got to be herself, and the sketch with Kristen Wiig in the Secretary sketch, where she jumps through the thing and, was wearing the globe on her head and it falls off, and you just see her laughing and genuinely smiling to the camera. We finally got to see the warmth from Heidi Gardner that we didn't get to see for so many years, because she's always so great at going into character. So I think she's become endearing to people who watch the show now, and that lets her have so much more range on the show. And I think she's like SNL sweetheart right now, where people like love her and want to root for her. And as a result, Bill, where last year you said that comment to me, I felt like there was a ceiling to what she could do on the show. And I don't think there is a ceiling anymore. I think that there is an opportunity here for her where she could get into the Mount Rushmore one day. I don't know that she's there now, because I don't think that she's driving enough sketches for me to put her in the same conversation as like Kristen Wiig and Kate McKinnon and Jan Hooks and Amy Poehler. But to me, she is more in the conversation of that next room, like not in the first room of the Hall of Fame, but the next room there, where we can start talking about people who actually have a resume to be considered all-time greats. And I think this was a fantastic season for Heidi, and she should be really proud of everything she's doing on the show.
Absolutely agree. Huge Heidi fan here. I wanted to point out, I mentioned that there was a lot more diversity in the screen time leader as far as seeing different names every week. So I mentioned, Colin and Jay had some screen time leading, of course, with Update, but Heidi led the cast in screen time 4 times. So that means in 4 different weeks that we saw the most of her. If you looked at every segment of SNL this season, there was a 35% chance that Heidi was in it, because she's the appearance leader. So like last season, Cecily Strong, left at Christmas, but she led the cast 5 out of 6 episodes. So she was the winner of that stat last year, even for being in a small portion. And in hindsight, we know why, because she was on her way out. So with Heidi Gardner, we have like all these different names being screen time leader. She was the only one to hit 4 times. So I wanted to point that out. And just, so many good pieces. I love seeing that Secretary sketch come back, because 1, I'm a fan of it, but 2, it was just a nice way at the end of the year to bring back to the earlier part of the year and have a character recur. So I know I was, being a little funny Bill by saying we needed Garrett from Hinge to come back. But as a fan of the show and tracking the show, I like to see those things come back because they bring some continuity when we look back and from the future to the past and see, you're going to remember Garrett from Hinge a lot more when it comes back. Maybe it doesn't need to be a third time or a fourth time. Lisa from Temecula has now been 3. But I do like to see Heidi have a recurring character be in an age where they're not so frequently. I was thinking about that Chloe Fineman earlier. Like, we don't see any recurring characters from her outside of impressions. So for Ego to have Lisa and now Heidi to have one, I love that. So we've seen it on Update with, the boxer's girlfriend and things like that. But to have a sketch that she led twice, beginning of the year, end of the year, that made me happy. So Heidi Gardner and John, I mean, you showed this last week, but she, wins that appearance title, which was so dominated by men. So Amy Poehler had a hell of a run, but surprisingly, Kate McKinnon never got that crown. So Heidi Gardner now has a trophy in her case that Kate McKinnon does not have, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And 88 sketches to, lead the cast this year. That's the most amount of sketches for a cast member in a single season since season 44. So it's been 5 years since we saw a cast member this many times on the show. So honestly, fantastic for Heidi. And, to me, probably should be number 1 on this list.
Yeah, I mean, the bike sketch, I keep mentioning it. He cut that sketch, Heidi wins the season. So that's how close they were, though. That's why I keep mentioning it over and over, because it does
Mikey
come
was
down.
like, on your left.
It does come down to that of just, eating some screen time and at the very end, and it just pulled Mikey ahead. So let's go to number 1, the winner of the SNL stat competition, Mikey Day.
Yeah, here we go. You're a champion for this season, Mikey Day. What do you got to say, Mike?
Finished with a 90.1. So that did win him the trophy this year. But as I mentioned, looking back, this is a conversation for a future By the Numbers episode, but I am interested in it. So I'll plant the seed now that there was a lot higher scores from cast last season to this season. So if we look at the season 48 average, the power rankings, now that we're at the end of tonight's power rankings, we had Kenan 106, Bowen 96, Cecily in her short time a 95, Heidi 93. So, and that's all ahead of Mikey from this season. From last season, because he had an 85. So we did have 4 cast members last year that would have beat Mikey this year, if that makes sense. So even though Heidi did not win the trophy, it's kind of like when quarterbacks have passing yards and 5 of them would have beat last year's number 1 winner. They're kind of the same thing. So here are Mikey's stats: 85 appearances, second tie with Kenan, screen time, hour 56 and 18 seconds. That puts him third behind Jost and Bowen. His screen time stayed exactly the same on average. I saw my chart and I was like, I had to have made a mistake right there. So I recalculated it. I was like, oh shit, they're the exact same. So his average screen time was the same in 48 with the short season that it was in 49 with 20 episodes. His top co-star, JJ, 45 shared segments. He had a few live from New York, and Dakota Johnson, Gillis, Gosling, Maya Rudolph. Did not appear on Weekend Update and was in a promo for the first time in a long time with Dua Lipa. So those are his side stats. But of course, being the power ranking winner, he never had a bad episode. Bill Kenney, we talked about the Mikey Day Renaissance, the Redaissance, whatever you want to call it. And here we are. He finally gets the crown after all that work he put in since we've been podcasting.
Yeah, as LL Cool J said, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years, and it's stunning. This is one of those things that, to be a true fan of the show, this is the kind of thing that really makes you think. It's amazing to think where he was just 3 short years ago. A great utility player, a great guy to go to when you needed a brother or a husband in a sketch. But he was not dominating the way that he has the last 2 seasons. And it's a well-deserved crown. Even if he won it on that biker sketch, even the equivalent of winning a batting title on a bunt single. I'm okay with it because Mikey's a good dude, and he really has come on strong the last 2 years. So between getting the Biden impression from JAJ, him and JAJ may be 1 and 2 next year because of all the presidential stuff that we're going to see. And then, of course, Beavis and Butthead, again, like he was so great in that sketch. So love to see it. The home videos as well with Dakota Fanning was a highlight for me. So great job by Mikey.
Dakota Johnson.
Dakota Johnson.
What did I say?
Dakota Fanning. Bill, we just started the show, man. You need to keep some energy for a few more hours.
Dakota Fanning. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So I go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was going to say that just to pivot to John. Interesting episodes that I keep, making fun of the bike sketch to push him over the cliff. But these early episodes, you would not expect Mikey Day to absolutely dominate. We can talk about cold opens for sure that pumped that number. But his in all my stats from season 44 to now, Mikey Day's 2 best episodes were Bad Bunny was one of them. So he crushed in the Bad Bunny episode, had the first sketch of the night with the rap battle, logged 13 minutes, 39 seconds, was in the episode on screen for 25% of the night. So that's just when you think, Mikey will zig, he'll zag, and he's like killing the Bad Bunny show. So Mikey Day really has a lot of tricks in his bag. So there's a lot to say about him. But, John, I want to just throw that out there because I think it's funny.
It is very funny. Honestly, if you questioned, was Mikey Day... Well, look, I'll say, sorry, I'm going to take it back for a second. I still think season 48 was a better season than season 49. But if you questioned if Mikey had a good season in season 49, let me tell you 3 things that would not exist in this season without Mikey Day.
This is John Schneider's top 3.
Yes. Number 1, Washington's Dream. The new sketch that everyone was talking about, saying it was one of the most brilliant written sketches. And obviously it's not just Mikey who wrote that sketch, but Mikey had a factor in it. And that sketch doesn't happen if Mikey Day is no longer on the show. So we don't get Washington's Dream, which could be the sketch of the season. We don't get Beavis and Butthead if Mikey Day is no longer on the cast anymore. And that's a moment that is cemented in history. And I think it is rare in modern times. You never know which season, you never know which episode it'd be, but it's very rare when everybody turns on the show that, is long gone away. And it's like, oh my God, SNL is still on, and it's for a good reason. It's for a good reason, right? Like we're all like looking around. We're like, okay, the casuals are here. They're not saying the show isn't funny anymore. Yes. Like Mikey did that for us this year. So we have to give credit to that. And third piece on his resume is that he is playing the current president of the United States. The impression was given to him, and that was this season. So no, we did not see it a lot, but he is now being set up as having a major role moving forward. So for me, I totally understand why he's a leader of the cast. And saying all of that doesn't even begin to talk about the amount of sketches that they used him properly to be able to fill roles in sketches and add a good laugh. Like, I know some other cast members were better for the one-off jokes, but to me, he is still so valuable, not only for sketches that he writes and contributes to the show, for other people using him. And I'm totally with Bill. Never would have expected this to happen a couple years ago. And this renaissance from Mikey continues from last year into this year. Again, another great season for Mikey Day.
Also want to point out, Mikey Day earned the stat crown without any help from Weekend Update, which is pretty fascinating because that's a aspect of the show that you're always going to get an A roll, typically being your own desk piece, and you're going to get at least like 250 to 330 screen time on average for a desk piece. Mikey had none of those. So Mikey, Molly, and Troast were not an update at all. And Mikey Day ends up on top of the whole leaderboard here. He had a lot of cold open appearances, only a few Bidens, though. So we can't just say that like JAJ's Trump, Mikey Day soared on Biden, because there's only a few of those. And one of them was only a few seconds in the Longfellow Gavin Newsom phone call ending. But he was in 12 of those. and put up like 24 minutes of screen time there. So he was using a lot of cold opens outside Biden as well. That helps a lot. But Mikey Day going into season 50, I think I might miss his writing as much as his performances. So for that reason alone, bring Mikey Day back. Love you, Mikey.
I agree. Yeah, Scott in the chat asks what Mikey's last update piece was, and I believe that's the one with Punkie Johnson from last season.
Yeah,
so.
I believe so, which was
Yeah.
awesome. Love to see more of that, like cast members as themselves. There's a funny thing where you get to know this cast so well, and you kind of think about like, has Punkie and Sarah met each other? Like, you don't see them at the same time. You know, they're
I worked on those stats recently.
Things. Yeah, and I loved seeing Punkie with Mikey because they were themselves, you know, wearing their own clothes and just talking as themselves, and things like that really tickle me. So more of that.
Well, congrats to Mikey Day. Back. Seriously,
congrats
great season for Mikey.
So, all right, the time right now is 3 hours 24 minutes. What was last year's, John?
Ellis put it in the chat. Last year, we had, what was it, 309 or 308.41. So we're 16 minutes over right now. We did it. So if you took the over, then you go, but nowhere near season 47's 4 hours and 29 minutes is the record.
All right, shout out Nicole.
Yeah, seriously. Also 21 cast members, a lot to talk about there. But this was a blast to go through this with you guys.
Yeah, so much fun. I say it every year. Bittersweet to end the season because it means that it's all over, but I love to look at these slides, so I can't wait to look at them on my own as well. So I encourage you to, if you're listening, go on YouTube and follow along, or check out the socials and just, you know, zoom in on all that stuff, because this show would have been 6 hours if I read every stat on those cards, and there's so much good shit there. So please check them out. Again, shout out to Ellis and Matt for doing that, going through my crazy spreadsheets to find all that. So applause to them for that alone, let alone how good they look. So by the numbers in the books, season 49. I can't wait to do 50 with you guys, and hopefully we can do this show again. Just the three of us, and go through those numbers again, because it's a fascinating look. And if you don't agree, I can't believe you're watching at 3 hours, 24 minutes. So thank you, John. Thank you, Bill. All the guests I've had, Victoria, everybody who's been on By the Numbers this year just has added so much great insight. Hard for me to think of all that stuff. So I like to have great panelists who can point out stats that are on the screen. So I appreciate all of you, especially the patrons, the people in the live chat, everything. Bill Kenney, thanks for being here, buddy.
Thank you for having me, Mike. This is such a blast to look at all these numbers, and the hard work that you put into this every week is so impressive. So tip of the hat to you. And yeah, you can follow me at BKLove73, and looking forward to our summer series coming up, John, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I can't wait to be with you for that. So that'll be really exciting, Bill.
Yeah, I should be approaching 100 episodes by the fall, so that'll be. Do I get a cake in my house when that happens?
Potentially. Yeah, we will see. Also, very impressive, Bill, at your age, that you made it 3.5 hours without having to go to the bathroom during this podcast. It's,
you know what, John? You were so damn close to making it through the whole show.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, I love you guys. Like, so great to hang out with you for so long. And yes. Bill, I'm looking forward to being with you every Monday night. So, Mike, if it's okay with you, let me tell the listeners the schedule that's coming up here. So if you didn't get enough SNL season 49 wrap up material, we just did 5 hours between the roundtable and this podcast. So much to talk about from the season. We will have one more podcast, and it's a really fun one, and that'll be happening on Monday night, next Monday, June 3rd, where Sammy K and I will be here with a bunch of our patrons who will be calling in, and we'll be chatting about the season, getting everyone's thoughts. We'll also be answering questions. So this, the Monday show is a little interactive, and I love seeing the chat of this one as well. But this is your opportunity to tell us what you want us to talk about. What are the storylines from the season that we haven't talked about yet? So we're going to put out a form over the weekend. Send in your questions for the show, and myself and Sammy and the patrons will answer that on Monday night. There's still a chance to register for that show. So if you'd like to come on camera with us. You can keep your camera off actually, but if you want to come on the show with us and just talk about anything from the season, join us, patreon.com/the SNL Network. There's also a great backlog of the extra podcasts that we did this season exclusively for the patrons. And then you will also have an opportunity next week to sign up as a patron to help Bill and I throughout the summer as we're counting down the 50 greatest SNL hosts of all time. So that will begin every Monday starting June 10th. We will also have a cast member interview next week, hopefully. So fingers crossed on that, fingers crossed. And then on Thursday of next week, 8 nights from now, we will have the premiere of everything you need to know about Saturday Night Live, the series that we've been working on for over a year now that we're very excited to present to you. Chapter 1 will be available next Thursday evening, and it'll be here on the YouTube channel, so you can learn everything about SNL from 1975 to 1976, and it will be continuing on from that. So it is a great way to find out about old seasons of SNL if you want to catch up on those as we head towards the 50th anniversary. So much great stuff happening here at the Saturday Night Network, and it just honestly, like I say every time, it is an absolute pleasure to work with everybody behind the scenes. Great job, everyone, and on the podcast as well, Mike, Bill, and everyone who joined By the Numbers this year. So thankful for all of you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, you're the reason we're all together. So I was going to mention that to wrap up, get all sappy at the end. You know, By the Numbers, the first spinoff of the SNL Stats days way back in fall of 2020. So we're going back a ways, and it's just been so much fun. We've covered so much SNL, and now we get to look back at all these amazing video pieces that John and James have prepared and get to talk about all the eras that we haven't covered for you in real time. So I can't wait to watch them. Personally, it's going to be a blast. I mean, it's, unless you're Bill Kenney, then who remembers all this stuff? So that's why we need these videos. So these youngins can catch up, or people who are new to SNL who are now super into it. So what more can we say? If you like By the Numbers and like the stats, please leave a review, subscribe, shout out By the Numbers, because this is the whole reason we're here is the stats, right? So if we didn't do that, then who knows where we'd be. So I couldn't be more proud of John and everybody who helps out with the stats, because it really is so fun. So thank you, everyone. For John Schneider, Bill Kenney, we are a presentation of LateNighter.com. We will be back next season, season 50. We will see you then on By the Numbers. I am Mike Murray of the SNN. Thank you and good night.